good to go.
Good to go? Okay. Good evening, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Education for March 9th, 2021. We will now call this meeting to order, and we'll start off with a roll call. Mrs. Smith, would you please do a roll call for us?
Mrs. Henrich?
Here.
Mr. Rich?
Here.
Dr. Blau? Here. Mrs. Fox?
Here.
Mrs. Weems?
I'm here.
I myself here. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. We will now move to our next agenda item, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Blau, would you please lead us?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will now move to the approval of the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of Education, Tuesday, March 9th, as written.
Thank you, Mrs. Heinrich. Is there a second?
Support.
The motion to approve the agenda by Mrs. Heinrich was supported by Mr. Rich. Is there any discussion? The only thing that I want to make mention of is that we recently added an agenda item as an action item, and we'll talk about that a little later today, but that has been posted, that we will have both a discussion and potential action related to our learning plan. Just wanted to be transparent about that. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion passes. Thank you, the agenda is approved. We will now move to announcements. A few announcements. First, welcome to our first in-person meeting since March of 2020. It's been almost a year. We are excited to be in person. Please work through us as we may have some technical difficulties, but we're going to plow through. FPS has a vision for high achievement for all of its students. Together with our community, we will engage every student in a quality learning experience, empowering each student to become a thoughtful, contributing citizen in a changing world. The board's priorities for 2021 are fostering development of 21st century skills, assessing program impact on student achievement, fostering a positive district culture and climate that incorporates equity and inclusion, recruiting, hiring, developing, and retaining high-quality staff that reflects diversity, and ensuring equitable practices. The board has agreed on goals for the remainder of the school year, and at each meeting, we will remind ourselves of these goals and our progress. The first goal is to build board unity. The board's aim is to be high-functioning and collaborative. A board workshop was scheduled for March 2nd to further this goal. The second goal is to conduct a superintendent search and create a transition plan. The Superintendent Committee continues to meet with School Exec Connect, our search firm, to further this goal. We've reached out through our normal channels and through social media in order to further identify focus groups to help inform the superintendent candidate profile. The focus group meetings are scheduled for March 9th and 10th, and a survey was also sent out to the community through listserv requesting input. We will focus on student achievement data. At our February meeting, we reviewed NWEA data along with report card grades and student engagement data during the pandemic period and the prior period. We are working to develop a cadence for further reviews of student achievement data and are scheduling a Board of Education data workshop. We will review and improve community relations. To further this goal, we are forming a committee to conduct community engagement. We will proactively plan and provide timely communications on the continuity of learning plan. We are actively working toward robust summer and fall in-person programming, and we are also discussing today the continuity of learning plan, and we'll have a discussion. We will ensure district resources are aligned to priorities and goals. We will review budget assumptions and parameters in March to align our budget priorities. Since our last meeting, the board attended several workshops, several events with the Oakland County School Board Association, the Black History Program, and several committee meetings. The board received and responded to all correspondence as of noon today. While the board has not historically responded to all emails, our board believes that communication is key, particularly in this environment. So over the past few months, every single email has been received and there's been a response. We'll continue this practice in this environment, but ask that our community be patient with us. We are public servants, but have additional commitments in addition to volunteering for board service. When communications are made, it is typical for the board president to serve as the spokesperson on behalf of the board rather than to receive individual responses from each board member. Public comments will be shared after discussion items, but before action items. This will be the opportunity to share general comments. As explained on our website and through the district communication, public comment will now be treated as it has been in the past when meeting in person. Anyone present in the WebEx event may sign up to express a comment. The sign-up form is available on our website. If the public comment is intended to be critical of or express dissatisfaction with a particular staff member, student, or group, you are encouraged not to identify the person by name. You may request a private meeting with district representatives or utilize the complaint process found in our policy for resolution at the closest point of origin. Generally, board members and the superintendent will not respond to public comments during the board meeting. Issues may be referred to the superintendent for investigation, study, and/or response. Again, the board plans to discuss tonight our Return to Learn plan. Several recent events have contributed to the board addressing this in our agenda ahead of our regularly scheduled reconfirmation plan expected for March 23rd. First, we've received more data on COVID and spread. Second, the district and the board have conducted research and have the benefit of experience from other schools. And third, the district has made significant efforts to procure vaccinations for staff, including contracting with Concentra, Ascension, Beaumont, Botsford, Henry Ford, West Bloomfield, and Oakland County to see if we could obtain vaccinations for our staff. On Thursday, February 25th, we received great news on the COVID vaccine front. Oakland Schools has entered into a partnership with an outreach program called Educate to Vaccinate in cooperation with DMC Hospital. And the goal is to make COVID-19 vaccines available to all Oakland County teachers and staff who want one. And that ends our announcements. Our secretary has had a matter to attend and is therefore not present for this meeting. We've asked Mrs. Smith to assume his duties due to his excused absence. So I will now ask Mrs. Smith to present items from the secretary.
Good evening. The board has received communications regarding Return to Learn, spectators at winter sports, superintendent search, NWEA, March is reading month, and public comment. Communications are acknowledged, and when appropriate, a response is provided. A list of correspondence can be found in the board packet, which is available on the Farmington Public School website.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. We will now have the legislative update by Mr. Rich.
Sorry about that. Just wanted to fix that right here. A few things have happened recently regarding things from the state legislature, specifically with regards to school funding. As we all know, House Bill 4048 was passed by the legislature, presented to the governor yesterday, and signed today. Thus, more changes coming to school districts across the state. And for all this, I just wanted to take this moment to thank our state representative, Samantha Steckloff, as well as her staff, who have been in constant communication with our district and trying to get more information for us, as well as help try and further our the needs of our district and make sure that those are at the forefront when we are looking at next steps. A few other bills have been introduced, including mandatory instruction and professional development on warning signs and risk factors of suicide and depression, referred to the Education and Career Readiness Committee. That was from Senator Hertel, as well as a modified policy and procedures related to the prohibition of bullying, and so that was also from Senator Hertel. There were a lot of bills introduced this past week, but our main ones we've addressed and we'll be addressing later tonight as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. We will now move to district updates. Up first is our superintendent district update.
Good evening, everyone, and happy Reading Month. March is Reading Month. It's a great month. So it's also Women's History Month, but very excited about Reading Month. I would like to always acknowledge someone in the district updates, and so tonight I'd like to acknowledge our district librarian, Mr. Jim White, who hopefully you were able to watch him and I discuss our One School, One Book program in the district spotlight. Our book is for the month of March, or the book that our students are reading or that our families are reading at home, is called Dragons in a Bag, and I believe the author is Zetta Ellison. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. As we discussed during our spotlight, I did not follow directions, so I read the whole book, and then I bought the next one because I had to know what happened, but sorry, Jim. But so please, I hope that everyone is participating. That's a wonderful program. So today is March 9th. Almost exactly 1 year ago today, we were at the point where basically our whole entire world changed here. Our school district closed, all school districts closed, and we just started living in this new world that we're living in now. So we will do something more formal at another time, but just want to acknowledge all of the hard work that our teachers, our administrators, our custodians, our bus drivers, every single member of our staff has engaged in during this very, very difficult year. I want to also acknowledge how hard this has been on our families. We absolutely understand. Many of us are parents as well, and so we are living the same life that you are in many cases. So just again, acknowledging it, but we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, so I'm very hopeful as we move forward that we'll see some shifts. So we'll be discussing some of that today. And I think I will just leave it there because we will have much to discuss later in the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Goodrum. We'll now move to the CTE programming pilot course. Can you help us? Oh, we've got a presenter.
Miss Melanie Nowak, I believe, will be presenting, and Mr. David Reese.
Wonderful, thank you.
Not well.
It's hard to hear.
Too well.
No, we can hear you. It is muffled. I mean, this is difficult with the masks on. I'm trying to understand what our options are. This is good. Yeah, this is better.
I'm going to go ahead and start over with VI.C. This is Scott. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows what's on our program. The first piece that I just spoke on is the graduation alliance program. Okay? The graduation alliance is a fully online program that is provided through Farmington Centers to support in-district and out-of-district students. All right? The positive part about the graduation alliance program is that over 70% of our participants are out-of-district students. And with the graduation alliance program, even though it's fully online, they do have an instruction coach that's provided through the graduation alliance. It's not an academy program. Okay, to support that. But with the revenue of bringing 70% out-of-district funding to the program, we do have a 0.5 FTE that we use to support the program that provides the counseling components of a regular high school student so they can tap in to the resources of Farmington Public Schools. All right? That's the first program. The second program, which I'm very excited about, and hopefully you are aware of it, we also host the Adult ESL program, which provides our adult community an opportunity for language acquisition and support. We currently have over, and I should have gave the number, with Graduation Alliance, we currently have over 100 students within Graduation Alliance. With the Adult ESL program, we have a whopping 134 participants in the program. With that, we also offer childcare for the individuals who come during the daytime. Once we get past this COVID situation, we'll offer daycare services. And because of that big number, we also now offer evening courses as well with that program. One thing that I'm very proud of is that this year I recently submitted for a career development grant for the adult ESL population, and we were one of 3 districts to receive that grant to help them with career readiness. Okay, so we have a collaboration with Michigan Works, and it's been very fruitful with giving them career training, and we have CTE Fridays. And the reason why I gave that is kind of like a perfect segue to what's going to happen with the rest of this explanation today that you'll hear about the Farmington Central program, which you're all here for. So without further ado, before I go ahead and go any further, I want to share you a video that kind of gives you on a first-hand account what the students are experiencing at Farmington Central.
Central didn't just help me pursue my goal, but it helped me figure out what the goal was, because coming into Central, I honestly didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what major I was going to get into.
With my teachers, I started getting more comfortable with them, with talking, and they asked me what things could they do to make me feel comfortable in their class, which is something I really appreciate from a person.
My experience here has been amazing because honestly my grades have been great, honestly.
Teachers are really good. They help you. They answer emails very fast. I actually get my work done, and it's just a little easier for me because they go at my pace.
our teachers are able to talk to us and help us through like problem situations. It's a lot easier to get our work done here. It's just overall been a really great experience.
So in order to qualify for the dual enrollment, I needed all of my graduation requirements, and being at Central, I was able to get all the courses I needed out of the way and done and finished earlier than I had expected, and all of my teachers had seen how well I was doing throughout the classes I was having at Central, and they highly recommended that I apply for the dual enrollment, and being at Central is the only reason I'm even able to do it right now.
The dual enrollment program really helped me understand what it felt like to be a student in college and what it is to deal with professors and college work, so it makes it way easier for me to transition from a high school student to a college student.
I just want to thank Central for giving me the opportunity to be able to be dual enrolled this year, because it's definitely helping me be more prepared for college next year.
I did not know what Michigan Works was. I will always see the little ads, but I never knew what it was. I always thought it was just like some type of business. And we would go to the Michigan Works class. There would be a Michigan Works person there talking about different programs and types of things, opportunities they have, trades and businesses opportunities. Well, I ended up doing robotics for OCC, and I started in fall. So far, we've been learning about the specs of robots and how you can actually do a thing where you get a certificate, and then once you get the certificate, you can go into like plants and work on the robot arms that help put the doors on and things like that. I think it's perfect because you can come straight out of high school and have a great paying job and automatically have a career based on Michigan Works.
I really think that, you know, when I first heard about Central, I feel like they might think the same thing as me, but when they come here, they'll love it. They will. It's not crowded. It's just, you know, you can breathe.
I definitely miss the environment of Central as like the little tight-knit community. That's definitely my favorite part of Central.
Mr. Reese, I don't know if you're able to, but you may want to take, if you can hold the mic, it might be better.
What'd you say now?
Can you hold the mic? Can you take it off the stand?
There you go. There you go. Because I definitely want to have an opportunity to kind of address the smiles that hopefully you saw from me, and I know from some of the board members that have been here for a while. If you don't know our history, I mean, last year, I can just tell we were 75% African-American males. We only had 6 females in the entire building. I'm happy to report now we're 100%, 50% female and male participants, and also too with our diversity. This video was not staged. These are our students, and is now more reflective, and I know the board really held us accountable to make sure that we were more reflective as far as the participants within the program. I'm so proud of that before I go any further. Also, this was unstaged as far as the student testimonies. We received information from from Mrs. Novak. She told me that the new board members wanted to see what was happening at Farmington Central. And so this was just one day. We just saw some kids in the hallway and said, "Can you tell us about your experience at Central?" Now, the one young man was out of town, so we had to call him because he participated in Michigan Works last year. We haven't had an opportunity to do that series this year for the students, but we are going to do it. It'll start at the end of March once we finish through the testing process, okay? So I'll stop talking about the past, and I'm talking about the future and the program that I'm here to talk about. So from what you heard, I always think about myself and my personal vision is in support of our young people as being building a bridge, giving them an opportunity to transition to the workforce and understanding what their future goals are and helping them shape those goals. So what we found in NAF is an opportunity to support them in-house, because as you can see from the relationship component, once they bring up the PowerPoint, but we'll be further down the line, they'll catch up. With the relationship component, that is very important for our students' success at Farmington Central. So with NAF, the reason why is because Number one, which, let me start over. NAF is a National Academy Foundation. National Academy Foundation. And the reason why it's called that is because they offer several academies that are career-focused for student participation, okay? Now, the reason why we wanted to do NAF is that NAF offers mentorships and internships where they bring in-house for participation on site. We feel that's very important because when our students are in a comfortable environment, we see the change that happens in their academics and their performance when they're in a comfortable space. So that is the reason for the why.
Thank you. So as David was talking about, this just gives our students at Central yet another opportunity to be career, future, and college ready. So NAF is a great connector, and it has a great marriage with the CTE programs, and that's why you're hearing from me today as well. I've been working with David on this project because it really goes well with all of our CTE programming of the district. So all of the internships that he mentioned, the mentorships, the work-based learning opportunities, that goes right in line with all of our CTE components. So, but the thing that really sold David on NAF was that academy piece. And so we're really looking forward to this because it's going to hone in and bolster student participation, really going to help with those internships and make sure they're active. And we didn't mention that some of these internships will be paid internships in the community, which will really help our Central students. And I forgot to mention that we also have a PSN pending with the state. PSN is our program serial number with the state for Central to be a CTE site. So all of our courses, CTE courses there, will have their own numbers, will have their own funding going just to Central. That's not something that we had before. So before, we've always had business classes at Central, but we haven't been funded through CTE for that. So that is pending. We're pretty sure that will go through so that we can start really bulking up that program with the needs, the current technologies, materials, and all the other resources that Mrs. Denise Cadwell will need for the start of this program.
Another piece is that NAF has been very user-friendly as far as being fully customizable to support us as far as the adaptation of our current curriculum and our business curriculum. So we chose because we already have Mrs. Denise Cadwell, who's a certified CTE teacher that works already for Central, and we've been using her for years to help with some of the personal curriculums with math supplements for our PCs. So with that, it was just a happy marriage because number one, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We already had some course offerings that students were very familiar with. And then plus when you add the work-based credentialing that can be added to this program to put them on two different pathways. If a student chooses to go right into the workforce, now they're not just going into the workforce without any credentials. They have something that they can have on a resume. With the internships and things like that, for the students that choose an additional pathway for post-secondary exploration on a college level, now look at you, you already have an established internship from when you experienced your academic support in the high school. So all of these things are so important as far as the flexibility to the program, and we feel that this is going to be definitely something that's going to support our students as they transition and understand that they are fully supported in their future goals.
So as David mentioned, we plan on running the VI.A program, which is the Business Administration Management and Operations career cluster for the upcoming year because Denise Cadwell is already at Central and has a very good relationship with the students and is also very familiar with that program. Not only that, but I'm sure you saw from the last presentation with CTE is that business is on the list for the hot jobs for Michigan. So this is what we are going to start with in the pilot, and then upon successful completion of this pilot, which we guarantee will happen because this is so good for our students, we plan on going into informational technology, so hoping to bring other computer and technology classes and cybersecurity to Central in subsequent years. So with this, I forgot to mention earlier that our students not only will be getting their CTE credits, their graduation requirement credits, but they'll also be getting NAFTRAC certification. So all of these are different certifications and badges that our students can put on their resumes so that they can be right in line for top jobs in the area.
Now, with all the wonderful things that have been said about this program today, at Farmington Central, we still want to keep our future core values, which is the last slide. We never want to exceed 125 because it's kind of pretty much physically impossible to do so and effectively keep all the great things that we're saying in place. Most of our students that come to us have an issue of, hello?
We hear you.
All right, there we go. So unfortunately, we have to, it's okay, I know there's a lot of technical issues, and also a little nerves, but hopefully you heard some great information. We never want to, once again, as far as our core values, we will never exceed 125 as far as the number of students that we have in our building. Our ratio, we feel that the optimal level is of 17-1. And the key for that is our dynamic staff always works hard to build relationships that's going to support the student's success. As you heard from the student testimonies, our team loves working with our young people. We want to know what their interests are. And when we discover those, we feel that it's nothing that we can't do when we work collaboratively together to make their goals come true, okay? So, once again, the program is NAF, which is the National Academy Foundation. It supports students with work-based credentialing and establish them on different tracks where they can start immediately entering the workforce with a work-based credential or setting up with internships for future career pathways beyond high school. So thank you for allowing us to share about our program today, and hopefully you can hear me through my mask and you had a great experience learning about some of the dynamic things that are happening here. And now at this time, I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Mr. Rich.
Thank you. I just want to first thank you for this presentation. I know some communication issues just with microphones and masks and all of the technology that we're doing to try and have these in-person meetings, and we're working on getting everything together. But I want everyone to understand and not let that detract from what an incredible program this is going to be. And for those of you who are new to the board, who are new to our community, having this at Farmington Central is such an important step. And having Principal Reese at the helm is incredible and a great gift for our district.
Thank you. Truly appreciate that.
Mrs. Smith.
As you know, I tear up every time you come to the podium. It's always great to see the students from Farmington Central speak out and let people know that that is not a school for students that have had problems.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes students have to be there because they can't be in large facilities. Again, I want to thank you for everything that you have done by giving these students a second chance. I also want to tell you thank you for having the best hidden secret in this community. I am elated to see that you and Ms. Nowak are working together.
Oh, definitely.
We have 3 high schools here,
Mm-hmm.
and I want people to remember that. Farmington Central is not a program. It is not a private school. These are our students. These are our babies. I've sat here and watched some of these kids that I've seen grow up from elementary all the way up, because as a board member, I have not only been a community member, but I've worked in these schools, and I was your hall monitor.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, I want to say thank you, because I'm tearing up, and you know I got a hard core, so I try not to do that in front of everybody. But I want to thank you and Ms. Nowak for doing this for our students, especially during these times. A lot of students will not be able to get into your Ivy League colleges or go to other colleges. You are giving our children a second chance, and I want to thank you both so much. If we didn't have this pandemic, I would hug the both of you.
Yes.
But I want to thank you both for all that you're doing for our kids. Thank you.
And one thing, I do want to share that with the community, for parents that may be at home that are listening to this presentation today and that might be an option for your child, please understand that we have the same Michigan Merit curriculum at our high school. We still have the same college, we still have college visits at our lunch participation. And one thing that like I said, I didn't go deeply into what's happening at Farmington Central, but one thing that we do here, we do the old school field trips because we're so small and mobile. So we take our young people to the Skill Trade Expo, the community college visit, and the university. We do that every year. So we make sure that they can see everything that's out there for them so they can be strategic in choosing their future, because we feel that, 90%, and that's one thing, I didn't want to get long-winded, but when I first entered the district, I was in charge of doing the district audit as far as the seniors once they graduated. In my first year, 98% all university was our student population. By year 9, the world is changing. So 68% was choosing that straight traditional path. So now we have our students that are choosing, and they're still successful. The students haven't changed. It's just they're choosing different options in their career now. So we have to be more flexible to make sure that we understand and really are willing to support what they're truly passionate about. And even it might be more expedient than we choose as far as the parents. We have to get out of their way and support them on their path.
Dr. Blau.
Oh, I forgot we don't have to unmute, do we? It's so impressive what you are providing for our students at Farmington Central High School. Thank you so much, as other board members have already said, for all of the initiative that you are taking to seek out wonderful, new, exciting opportunities for our students. Not just at Farmington Central, but for our district in general. All of the new CTE options, both those that you've mentioned in prior meetings with the cybersecurity and the EMT program, and now the NAF options that you are going to be providing. This is so, so exciting. And we can't thank you enough for all the effort that you're putting into to create these new opportunities for our students here in Farmington. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Fox.
To the both of you, I just want to say, job well done.
Thank you.
Every child deserves a champion, and I see the two of you as being the champion for these children. Thank you so much.
I agree with everything my colleagues have said, and I don't want to repeat it, but access to opportunity is key, and I appreciate that you're providing exposure and access through NAF, through CTE, through Michigan Works, and I'd love to see you continue to do that. I know that that's happening across all of our high schools. I appreciate you championing some of this, and would like to see it continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now move on to our... We're now going to move on to our next agenda item number 6, which is reports from board committees. The first report comes from the Superintendent's Evaluation and Succession Planning Committee. I will go ahead and give that report. Going forward, Mr. Rich may provide this report, as Mr. Rich is the district's contact person for the search firm. So the Superintendent's Evaluation and Succession Planning Committee met on February 25th. That committee consists of myself, Mr. Rich, and Mr. Walker. The committee discussed the superintendent's search timeline and focus groups and open forums and for the purpose of collecting feedback. We wanted to be sure that we were being as inclusive as possible. In addition to our normal communication channels, we also reached out through social media to solicit some input. We agreed on the following stakeholder groups: teachers, building level administration, central office administration, PTA, FAPN, community equity organization, the beloved community, other community members, members of the Chamber of Commerce and local government, high school students, in particular student roundtable, and we also wanted to reach out to middle school students. So all of those stakeholder groups are informing us as we develop our plans, and that ends the committee report. The next committee report comes from the Academic Excellence, Strategic Planning and Communications Committee, which is Dr. Blau.
Thank you, President Weems. We met on the 26th of February, and we have scheduled meetings every 2 weeks for throughout the rest of the school year. The key issues we addressed have to do with planning for summer school opportunities for our students. Mr. Curtis Lovio, who is our summer school supervisor, shared with us many of the exciting opportunities that we are going to have available this summer for our students. We also, as you heard, we talked about the NAF and CTE and Michigan Works options that are being made available at Farmington Central High School. We also, our committee is the Academic Excellence and Strategic Planning and Communications Committee. So we also talked about the strategic plan, and we're very excited that over 100 community members have already expressed interest in joining one or more of the strategic planning committees, so we're very excited about that as we move forward with the strategic planning for our district. And finally, we had a tremendous amount of discussion around increasing in-person and synchronous learning, which we'll be talking more about at greater length during our meeting tonight. However, I would like to point out that this is a topic that we have continued to research and discuss, both as a board and as the Academic Excellence Committee. Our central office administrators have been meeting regularly with groups of teachers and building level administrators to try and find ways to increase in-person learning within the mitigation guidelines of 6 feet of social distancing, which we, the board, have insisted upon so far this school year. One of the struggles that we have identified and that we talked about at our February 26th meeting is that we are having difficulty finding ways to increase face-to-face learning and still maintain the 6 feet of social distancing. So that's where we stood on February 26th, and in the, has it only been a week, 2 weeks? Since then, we have continued to gather information about the other districts who have gone back for more hours per day and per week of in-person learning. How have they accomplished that? And by and large, we've found that they have accomplished that by relaxing their 6-foot social distancing mitigation policies. So we'll talk more about that as a board later, but I just wanted all of you and our public to know that this is a conversation that has been ongoing since we joined the board in January, those of us who are new, and others even before that, and that once we make a decision at the board meeting, we don't then just go home and forget about it. We are, each of us, independently continuing to collect information, continuing to talk with board members in other school districts, continuing to check and see what is the CDC saying, what is the Oakland County Health Department saying. So this has been an ongoing investigative process that we have continued to engage in daily to continue to reevaluate what is going to be the best for our students here in Farmington.
Thank you, Dr. Blau. Next, we have the Finance Committee. Mrs. Heinrich?
Yeah, that would be me. We met, myself and Mrs. Weems, on March the 3rd. Mr. McCarthy of McCarthy and Smith walked us through the bid process to help new board members, which would be me, understand the construction projects and how they're put together, and that was really, really helpful. And I'd be happy to share more details with new board members if they're interested. Farmington Bid Pack number 2, which is the work at Lanigan, Gill, and Forest, is going to be presented today at the board meeting for both discussion and approval, and that was talked about at the previous meeting because of the time constraints, and they will explain that and go into more detail. We also received an update on the property. Mr. Willis of Plant Moran Cressa gave us a summary where they went and explored the options for relocating the central office complex, which includes the bus yard and the Maxfield Education Center. And they came to the conclusion that there really is not a cost benefit, that it would cost more to move than updating the current facilities. And then we talked about the budget timeline and parameters, and that's going to be presented today.
Thank you, Mrs. Heinrich. I believe you are also Human Resources.
Human Resources. Human Resources met on March 9th. Myself and Mr. Rich were present. They were given an overview of the staffing and talking about the scheduling being done for the fall, and explained to us the big picture that once the scheduling's done in each building and the schedule is developed based on ratios, talked about the challenges for staffing next year because there's going to be 3 pathways: the in-person, virtual with the Farmington staff, and then the third-party provider. They also gave us a picture of retirements and leaves, and we were interested to know the comparisons between the current year and the previous school year, and so they gave us a little bit of understanding of that. And Kathy Smith also walked us through an overview of probationary teachers versus tenure teachers. And she gave us an overview of the path to the teacher tenure process and on the teacher evaluation process. And currently, new hires have a 5-year probationary period. Those are new teachers with no experience. If there's new teachers hired into the district with previous tenure, then there's a 2-year probationary period. And they explained to the committee about the individual development plan and how they work together with their supervisor and develop the skills for success. Dr. Goodrum just talked about discipline issues and how the superintendent is involved with any issues that come to HR immediately, and the district is committed to restorative practice because that's always the goal with our employees. And they also talked about the new criteria for layoffs. Prior to 2011, the only criteria for layoffs, and I think this refers to teaching staff with seniority. The new criteria is really complicated, and it's tied to the teacher certifications, evaluations, and if the board is interested, that might be a good idea for future workshops.
Thank you. Mr. Rich?
Just one thing, just to note for an edit to the minutes. The meeting was called at 1:01. It currently says that I left at 12:08. Unless I didn't invent time travel, unfortunately. So it's probably 2:08.
Yet, Mr. Rich, you haven't invented it yet.
Thank you. We'll get that updated. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. And yeah, Mr. Walker is also on the committee, but he was out ill. But he'll be updated with everything.
Okay. Thank you for those updates. We're going to now move to discussion items. And so if someone can come up related to discussion item A. And while we're doing that, I just want to engage the board in a quick conversation about our process with respect to bid packs. So what generally happens, well, let me start over. What used to happen is, are you guys okay to hear me, or do I need to do anything with this? We're good? Okay. What used to happen.
I can hear you much more clearly through these.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, that's what I'm more concerned about. What used to happen was we generally have a process that we'd like to follow where we have something come up as a discussion item first before taking action on it in 2 separate meetings. And we do that for a number of reasons. One, we like for the board to have an opportunity to digest, to think, to ask questions. We also want to give the public the opportunity to provide public comment. We got some feedback from our consultants that in some cases, and this is the reason why we're having both discussion and action on this first item today, in some cases we need to move quickly on contracts, on bid packages. These matters now come to committee first, which didn't happen in the past. So it's coming to the Finance and Facilities Committee first. Then it comes to the board for discussion, maybe up to 2-3 weeks later. Then it comes back to us 2 weeks later for action. That's about a month or a month and a half where contractors can all of a sudden no longer become available. Contractors' schedules might get filled up. Steel prices are going up. Product prices are going up. And so, oftentimes, when we have both discussion and action in the same meeting, it's because of that urgency. We need to get, a contract sort of concluded in shorter time than a month and a half. So at some point, I think we need to have a discussion about what the board is comfortable with. If the board is comfortable with the committee having sort of a first review, if we want to continue having the committee and the board look at it first before it comes to action. No action, available for us today, but I do want us to give that some thought because I think we're going to get more of these bid packs that, the district is going to want us to act on sooner rather than later for the purpose of securing a better price and getting contractors scheduled. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Weems, for explaining the process and some of the changes that have started to occur over the last really few years where just that volatility in supply prices has necessitated trying to move things through on a quicker basis. So this evening, virtually, we have Scott Smith from Plant Moran Cressa and Aaron Phillips from McCarthy and Smith to present Bid Pack 2, which is for Lanigan, Gill, and Forest, to talk about the items that will be included in their recommendations. So I'm going to turn it over first to Scott Smith.
Bid package, which Jennifer mentioned, is for Forest, Gill, Lanigan. And actually there are a couple other site components, predominantly paving work over at North Farmington High School and Farmington High School as well. Smaller packages, but with the bulk of the work being at Forest, Gill, and Lanigan. Had a very good, successful turnout here. We put the project out for bid in February. Really good bid coverage. I give a lot of thanks to the team over at McCarthy and Smith for being creative, thinking outside the box to really maximize coverage in really a very tight and challenging bid market right now with schoolwork, given all the work here in Southeast Michigan. I won't steal all of Aaron's thunder here, but we had really good turnout. We're significantly under budget. We're able to really consider some alternates that Aaron will present. Just a very good process. We've thanked the team over at Wakely Associates too for putting together a good set of drawings in really an expeditious manner. So without further ado, I'll be sticking around to answer any questions if there are any. But Aaron Phillips from McCarthy and Smith's on the other line here.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. So Scott introduced us. Thank you, Jennifer. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm getting some feedback.
I believe we're getting feedback from Sean's mic. Or the mic that's hearing us from the mics.
Okay. If everyone can hear me okay. Scott introduced it. Yes, we had very successful bid coverage. The bids were opened on February the 25th. We had 76 total bidders, which equates to almost 5 bids per category, which is a really good outcome we like to see. The bid ranges from the lows. The total of the low was about $4.8 million, up to the range of the high was up to about $8 million. Scott alluded to a couple of alternates that we are proposing for the district to accept. The first being retrofitting of some existing unit ventilators at Gill Elementary School. That's going to add some bipolar ionization and some upgraded filters there. The base bid includes those across at Forest Elementary along with Lanigan Elementary. So as we move through, there's an equitability piece, making sure that all these new unit ventilators have the appropriate indoor air quality features. The alternate that we're proposing to accept is Lanigan. There's a room A108. It's a remodeling and adding a sink over to kindergarten room that needed to be added. It was not added several years ago in the first round of bonds, but since the program change have changed at Lanigan, there's a need for a sink in that room. And then the third is an alternate at North Farmington High School, some additional concrete replacement that it's lived its useful life, and it's time to get a courtyard area replaced there. So overall, the total award recommendation is $5,001,555 here tonight. And as Scott alluded to, we were approximately $800,000 under budget, which is it's a really big win for the district, and we're very pleased with the bidder turnout. So, having said that, I will be able to answer any questions that any board members have.
Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Aaron, and Scott. Couple of things.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith, hold on 1 second. Is this feedback occurring on the WebEx as well as in our ears? If it's okay, maybe just take, if it's okay for the public, maybe just, I don't know, take these off.
You want to take them in? Try again.
I'm trying to get were you guys getting feedback as well?
What about now?
Aaron? Okay, I think we're good now.
Okay. Should I unmute?
No, go ahead.
Or you want me to unmute?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry about that, guys. A couple of things. First, thank you for everything and always being transparent with what you bring to the table. When we say that we need new concrete at North Farmington, how often, I guess I'm looking at, with the Michigan
Ms. Smith,
weather.
one moment. I don't think they can hear you.
Pardon me?
I'm not sure if they can hear you.
They can't hear me?
You have to speak.
Maybe now.
People are.
And should I unmute?
Mrs. Smith, I think you should speak into the microphone.
Okay, okay. So can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so, can't do this one. Again, thank you. But I'm looking and hearing you say that we need new concrete at North Farmington. Is that because of the weather conditions here in Michigan? And how often should we be doing those repairs?
That's a good question, Ms. Smith. The concrete was nearing its useful end life at North Farmington. It could have potentially had a year or two more if it was stretched, but the reason we are doing it now is because a large area of the parking lot is being replaced, is slotted to be replaced and base bid this summer. So the east end of the parking lot and the north parking lot. It makes it more cost effective to do all of that work at the same time. So if the end bids were in a under budget fashion, which they turned out to be, we looked at accepting that alternate. Michigan winters they're tough, right? So we put a lot of salt down on the flat work. We want to make it safe for staff and for children in and out every day. Salt really eats away at concrete over the years. The more salt we put down, the faster it erodes. All of the facilities group does an excellent job maintaining all of our buildings here in Farmington. That is a big win. But with that, with the salt and the maintenance, the concrete does wear down. Useful life, you can get 10 years, you can get 15, you can get 20 years out of concrete. But all of this concrete was ready to be done at the time it is now, and it's not premature by any means. It's time to get this replaced.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Rich.
Yes. So my question is just regarding the contracts.
I don't think they can hear you. Hold on 1 second. Okay.
There we go. Is this any better? Okay, great. So I guess my question is.
No, hold on 1 second. Exactly. Sorry, Mr. Rich. Hold on.
But you got a feedback.
We'll wait for Mr. McGuckin to tell us what to do.
I think he's good. He just needed himself. I think he could do good.
Okay, I still can't hear myself though.
No, you won't be able to hear right now. We don't know what the issue is.
Okay. We're just on hold right now, guys, until we can find out what the feedback loop is.
Gotcha.
Oh, I thought I was hearing you in here. 'Cause
you're probably just hearing us. I think we're good now. I can't hear it in my headphones yet. I can't hear it in my headphones yet. There we go. Mr. Rich.
Okay, thank you. My question is with regards to the bids selected as well as those received. Just seeing if the ones we selected use union labor, and if not, if any of the ones that had applied do.
Mr. Rich, I missed the tail end of your question. I believe I heard you say, are any union contractors, if not, and then he cut out.
The other part is if any that weren't selected do, even if the one selected does not. Just were there any that applied?
I think I understand your question. Looking through our list here, I would say 40 to 50% of the contractors have union labor. The other do not. I believe that answers your question. If not, can you expand, please?
Sure. What about the ones selected specifically?
Correct. So about 50%, I would call it 50% at a quick glance here, are union contractors that are within the award recommendation package as the low bidder.
Thank you.
As the awarded low bidder.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you guys for your presentation. We will evaluate this in the next few minutes, I guess, when we get to action items. Thank you. Next, we have the review of the budget parameters and assumptions. Mrs. Kaminsky.
Well, thank you. As part of our continuing budget process, I'm going to review our budget timeline, and then the parameters and assumptions for fiscal year 22's budget. So in our virtual meeting this evening, Kim Pinchak, our finance director, is also in attendance. And after we had completed the budget amendment, which was presented to the Board of Education at the last meeting on February 23rd, we got to work on these budget parameters and assumptions so that we could review them with the board and then try, once they're approved by the board, put numbers to that so we could move forward and start looking at next year's budget. So just to highlight a few dates for this budget development timeline, again, this evening we're reviewing these parameters and assumptions. We'll ask that you approve them at the March 23rd board meeting. We will be bringing the proposed budget for your review at the June 1st meeting, as well as reviewing the tax levy for next year. So on June 1st, that's called our Budget and Truth hearing. And so you'll have a resolution later on approving June 1st as the date to hold that public hearing. And then on June 15th, we'll ask that you adopt the budget for fiscal year 22, as well as set the tax levy for next year. So the budget parameters are developed initially by myself as well as the finance director, and they are then brought to our central office cabinet for review to obtain input on their end. They were, then reviewed with the Finance and Facilities Committee at the previous meeting, and any input is gathered at that point. So again, we're presenting the parameters and assumptions this evening to gather input from you, either this evening or over the next few weeks before these parameters are approved. So really the parameters and assumptions are the high-level items that impact our budget in the greatest sense, not all the little details that go into the budget. So starting on the revenue side, again, student enrollment really drives a lot of our revenue. And so we obtain enrollment projections from Stanford and also from Plant Moran Cressa. And we analyze both of these numbers to determine what amount we might want to use moving forward. So Stanford this year estimated a decline of about 96 general ed students. Plant Moran Cressa estimated a total of 70 students. And we also have considered, over the last 5 years, our exiting senior class compared to an incoming kindergarten class. And so the difference between those two classes in this upcoming year is about 110 students. Over the last 3 years, we've also lost an average of 120 students between grades 2 through 11. Again, this year has been quite a challenging year. We have lost approximately 300 students. The state did come in and come up with that super blend to try and lessen the impact that a student loss or that enrollment loss would have on our funding this year. However, next year, some of that loss will be recognized. So looking at 300, we are anticipating that we will get some of those students to return to school, hopefully when we come back to school in a normal setting in the fall. And so we're estimating a loss of about 200 students for next year. So the governor did present her budget in early February, and she did have funding increases for K-12 education. One is the $82 per pupil increase. And so the governor has continued with this 2X formula, Farmington would receive $82 per pupil, whereas lower funded districts would receive twice that amount, so $164. She also proposed additional categorical increases. The budgets still need to go through the Senate and the House, and so at this time, what we're proposing to use to set next year's budget is that $82 per pupil increase. The Revenue Estimating Conference in January did indicate that revenues continued to improve along the way, so we feel this is a reasonable increase to build in. We also receive many categorical revenues such as special education, at-risk, adult ed, early childhood, and we're hoping that those will remain flat, if not increase next year. We also receive revenues from our nutrition services program to help cover some of their indirect costs. And so that's about 10.7% of their expenditures, excluding food and capital outlay. So about $146,000 is transferred to the general fund from the nutrition services fund to help offset those indirect costs. We're anticipating that federal grants will remain the same or increase. But again, if you recall when I talked about the budget amendment, we budget our federal revenues to equal our federal expenditures. And so there is no effect on the bottom line. So as federal revenues increase, our expenditures would increase at the same amount. Revenues for our PA-18, or special education dollars received through Oakland schools, we're projecting to decline slightly, about 1%, as well as removing some one-time funds that we received this year. So wage costs will be budgeted at negotiated levels. And so currently, we'll be negotiating all of our contracts, which expire at the end of this fiscal year, along with teachers who expire in August. And so once we get into that process further, we'll have better information as to what should be built into the budget at that time. We have budgeted for a reduction in wages and benefits for replacement savings for 10 teacher retirements. And this might be something that we take a look at increasing for this upcoming year based on staff that have put in for retirement. So our projected MIPSER's retirement rate, the initial information that was presented from the governor's office projected a slight increase in that retirement rate. So we're assuming a 0.5 percentage point increase versus the normal percentage point increase that we normally assess. That rate is not set until ORS determines what the actual rate is. But right now, we're estimating 28.5% as the normal cost rate and 14.5% for that UAAL. That's the unfunded accrued liability. So that's a total rate of 43%. So if you recall, that 14.5% is an added cost for us, and we also receive revenue to offset that portion of the expense. So based upon our current claims data, our health insurance costs continue to remain stable. We did have savings last year, or lower costs, I shouldn't say savings, but we had lower costs last year due to the pandemic. Lots of individuals throughout the country weren't able to get in for elective surgeries and things. So we are confident that our costs will remain stable going into this upcoming year. So we have not budgeted for any increase in our benefit costs for 22. So revenues from our preschool education will continue to move towards covering their direct program costs, as well as a portion of their indirect costs. So in a typical year, preschool education covers about 4% of their indirect costs. And that's really their tuition minus their actual expenditures, what's left over to help offset those indirect costs or things that are provided outside of their direct program. So our special education programs, in collaboration with other districts, we assume that those will be approximately what they are in the current year. So we have collaborative agreements with other districts who come into our district, and we provide services, and we're estimating approximately $473,000 of revenue. So the Capital Projects Technology Fund, as well as the Bus Purchase Maintenance Fund, those are capital projects funds that were established a number of years ago. The Technology Fund has been used to upgrade infrastructure, to refresh devices, and to provide overall technology throughout the district. The Bus Purchase Maintenance Fund has been used to purchase buses according to a schedule to keep them current, as well as fund needed capital projects throughout the district. When the recession hit about 10 years ago, any of the transfers that we were making at that time were eliminated from this fund as part of our budget reductions. And we were very lucky that our community has supported 2 bond issues, 2015 as well as our 2020 bond. And one of the items that we committed to was restoring those allocations to those funds so that we would have the necessary funds later on when those bond dollars were expended in full. And so we are proposing to transfer $300,000 into the technology fund, as well as $600,000 into the bus purchase maintenance fund to support those future projects after the bond is completed. The district continually investigates and tries to implement cost savings and cost containment measures. We have several green teams and energy savings programs in place. Other costs and revenues are anticipated to remain flat with the exception of utilities, and those are budgeted to increase 3%. So one of the items that we faced this year is that in our remote or hybrid setting, many of our revenues as well as our expenditures were reduced to reflect what is actually happening this year. And so in our budget preparation for next year, we have restored those revenues as well as those expenditures to their normal levels, where they would typically be in a normal fiscal year, to get the budgets back to that level. And then also we make all of our financial information and budget information available on the website under the budget tab and budget transparency. I can help answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions? I see none.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kaminsky. Okay, I think that moves us to item C, which is instructional delivery. And so before we have, or as we have Mrs. or Dr. Coffin come up, I'd like to just provide a little context here. The board has asked that we have a conversation at every meeting, not just once a month, because of the importance of this topic. As background, we started the year off with a recommendation to begin hybrid for a number of reasons, including infrastructure. The recommendation changed, and FPS started off the year remote with the expectation to begin hybrid by November. Recall in November, There were statewide shutdowns mandated, and so the district held off on a return until January 11th and January 15th. The decision to start elementary at 2.5 hours per day and secondary at 2 days per week was based on the desire to keep small cohorts, the desire to maintain high safety mitigation strategies, the desire to allow staff time for PD, PLCs, and planning time for both in-person and remote cohorts, and a number of different factors. I'd like to take the time to just stop for a minute and say thank you to the board and the administration. This administration has responded weekly, sometimes even daily, to changes required by the state or requests from the board or in response to the community. I also want to say thank you to principals, to teachers, to paras, to bus drivers, to the office staff, to counselors who have also been extremely responsive to parent and family needs and have been making changes also on a daily basis, constantly, wherever there's an opportunity to help families. I realize that the workload has been tremendous and the pats on the back have been few and far between, but we know that you guys are all working on what's best for our students. The board has asked the district to increase in-person learning. We've said that a number of times, and the district has come back to us and told us through committee and also at this board table that it's not going to be possible to do that in a significant way unless the board considers a change to the safety mitigation strategies. I also wanted to acknowledge the bill that came out earlier today. We learned that Governor Whitmer signed today HB 4048, the latest school aid stimulus supplement. We know that the governor's office also stated that they're continuing to look at the constitutionality and enforceability of certain provisions of HB 4048, including a requirement that schools offer so many hours of in-person learning in order to receive the aid. Now, we're going to seek additional clarification from the governor's office, and we also will continue to make the case that delays in funding is directly impacting our ability to plan for critically needed programs for our schools and our students, and that politics must be put aside to get that funding out the door into our districts as quickly as possible. We don't know what the impact of this bill is because there's still lots of questions about it. If there is an impact to school funding, that's certainly important and we have to consider it, but again, we have no idea at this point. So I would encourage the board to make decisions based off of what we know and what's best for our students in our district rather than solely on this bill. And again, what's most important to us are our students. I can tell you that I receive regular communications from several students on our plan. And I know that some of our students are progressing well, and I know that some of our students are not. And I want to thank our students for their resilience, for their adaptability, for their continued engagement, for keeping their cameras on, for answering questions, and for being supportive to their classroom environments. So huge thank you to parents and to students and to families. At this time, though, I'd like the district, just given all of that as backdrop, to advise us on the latest safety guidelines in consideration of what the board has asked you for, which is a significant increase in in-person learning. So we want to have that conversation again. I realize that, we keep having it, but conditions keep changing. The world keeps changing, and we need to be responsive to it in addition to being proactive. So thank you with that, Dr. Coffin.
Sure, I will start. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Dr. Goodrum and I will kind of talk through this part of the information. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can get closer.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I do want to just mention a little bit about what President Weems was speaking about, and also Dr. Blau earlier about some of those the parameters that we're working within, and just to let the board know kind of where we are in regards to the percentage of our students that are back in person, and then what that looks like and what that means as we start to continue to look for ways to increase opportunities. So currently at our high schools, we are anywhere from 42% at North Farmington to 48% at Farmington Central of our students choosing in-person and being in person.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? Are these just the secondary numbers?
For the secondary numbers, just, so as you know, on January 25th, we came back to a hybrid schedule that required a significant change to our second semester schedule. When that happened, we offered families the opportunity to choose in-person or remote. Actually, what happened is many of our families who thought they wanted to come in person chose to go remote. So these are the most recent numbers, just so you have an idea. We are able, everyone who wants to be in person at our high schools are in person. So what we hear is that they just want more time in person. When we look at our elementaries, the numbers are a little bit of a wider range. So we have some buildings with about 40 to 45% in person, and we have a couple of our buildings anywhere from 65 to 70% in person. So I want the board to know, in regards to the work that our principals are doing with families, we probably have about a handful across all of our elementaries where families, we're still looking for ways to have them come in person. As you know, we have reached out to our families for our third trimester, which is coming up, and we're making those accommodations ready for the March 15th timeframe on that. But I wanted the board to know, so when you think about the difference between a 40% in-person building and a 70% in-person building, I give a lot of credit to our building principals for working together and really finding those ways. They are all working within the social distance guidelines as well as all the other layered mitigation. So we're doing a really good job, I think, in trying to accommodate all of our families. But as has been mentioned earlier, with the social distancing guidance that the board has given, it's really going to be difficult to bring in more. So what we're looking at is ways to increase live instruction at our secondary levels and less asynchronous, where we know that's where some of our students are struggling. We're also pairing that, though, with professional development for our teachers to try to make the asynchronous time more meaningful for our students. So I just wanted to make sure the board did have additional information in the packet about some of the work that we're doing as we continue to meet with the groups. But I just wanted to give you the current state of where we are with the in-person.
Thank you. Are there any board comments, discussion? Mrs. Smith?
You mentioned the high schools and the elementary. What was your percentage for your middle schools?
The middle schools are right around 50%.
50?
So they're right in the middle there. Thank you. I apologize for that. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, honestly, really, I'm hearing from you guys that we're unable to increase in-person learning. I'm hearing, or had heard from the board, that we want to increase in-person learning. At this point, I think the board needs to have a discussion about whether the increase in in-person learning justifies a revisit of our previous stance on the highest safety mitigation strategies. And so at this point, I'd like to ask the district to help us understand, maybe frame for us what we're doing differently than as compares to state guidance, as compares to what the CDC recommends, so that we can start having a discussion about whether we're comfortable being more in line, perhaps, with state guidance and CDC guidelines versus where we were, 6 months ago, when this was still, relatively new, and the board, took action to implement the highest safety mitigation strategies.
And I will answer. In the future, I do request a longer cord because I have a short torso and no drawer because I have long legs. So I'm having a really difficult time up here. But so at the time, so let's go back to August. And let's go back to the metrics that we set in August, which were set because those were the recommended metrics at that time.
At that time.
As you all know, when we were preparing to return in January, there was a brand-new document that said, don't look at those metrics, look at these metrics. In between that time, we had phases, we had colors, we had letter codes. All of that has been discontinued, and we've been given just some general guidelines about look at spread in your community, look at, the percent positives, and look at more than looking in your community, look within your schools to see how that is going. So, interestingly enough, the Michigan Department of Education and the CDC still say 6 feet, that's still the strongest mitigation, but it also now the language has been added to say 6 feet where feasible. The Michigan Department of Education for full instruction, which is if you are bringing all your students in at once, we'll say non-hybrid, non-traditional hybrid, where students are cohorted, they have in their return to learn 3 feet as a recommendation. But they also use the language when feasible. CDC, when they say 6 feet when feasible, 3 feet when feasible, less than 3 feet, if it's not feasible, then they recommend layered mitigation, masks, partitions, filtration systems, hand hygiene, all things which we currently have in place. They also still recommend cohorting to the maximum extent feasible. So one of the things that I want to lift up is not that we are making a change in our decision to follow guidelines. It is the fact that the guidelines have continually changed. Like CDC just had new guidance out yesterday related to certain behaviors that are expected once you're amongst the vaccinated population. But just a couple of weeks ago, new guidance related to school. So this has been a very difficult time just as we try to make decisions based on science that continues to change because this virus has been in America for a little over a year. And so studies continue to come out. New research continues to be done, and we're learning more and more about it every day. So at this time, what's being recommended or what's being advised or what we're being told we can do, where before we didn't think we even could go below 6 feet. But now they're saying we don't even have to stand firm on 3 feet if we have, as the Farmington Public Schools does and has always had in place, layered mitigation strategies. As you know, we looked at the numbers last time of the staff, 667 I think of our staff had responded to our initial survey in February, and 67% of them had indicated they had at least had their first vaccination. We sent out another survey today, so we don't have the data yet, but we do expect for that number to be increased, not only because Oakland County Health Division has been able to provide more vaccines, but also, again, Oakland Schools has developed a couple of different relationships to allow for additional people to be vaccinated, specifying teachers. This is not to say, again, I don't want to make it seem like we still don't think that 6 feet is safer than 0 feet. But what we're saying is that guidance does allow us to take those measures if we feel it is necessary. And I know that Mrs. Weems, and I agree, said we shouldn't make decisions that are based on the passing of one bill, but we also have to understand that there's been an additional $125 billion that has been granted to the state of Michigan outside of this supplemental aid bill, so they'll have to renegotiate. And as I have spoken to Senator Steckloff, I've spoken to our legislative liaisons, and there is a feeling that the next money, too, will have attached to it the same types of caveats related to us having at least 20 hours of in-person instruction offered to our families. And so, unfortunately and honestly, I do feel like this has been politicized. No fault of any of our own. I think that it is incredibly unfair for our legislators to hold our funding hostage in this manner, especially when it was supposed to be given to us to do these programs for our students and not necessarily intended for us to have to jump through all of these hoops to make sure that we have the resources necessary to address some of the concerns that our families have or that our students have had because of what has occurred to them in this year. So I'm sorry. I think it's incredibly unfair. That's, you know, my voice is shaking because I'm angry, but at least I'm not yelling, so I like that. But, but anyway, that is where we are now. And so, but to be, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure how long you wanted my speech to be. Just kidding, I know it's not. But the other thing to note is, if we do reduce the, I need everybody listening to understand that if we reduce the social distancing guidelines, where we have not since January, we did back in October, had to close a classroom. But not since January, not since we've been back have we had to close a classroom, have we had to close a school. But what we do know for a fact is in the districts where they are in, you know, full person, it's not that it's not that more students are testing positive, is that when they have a positive test, the number of students that they quarantine becomes extraordinarily significant. So as right now, a school has said, I've only had to quarantine 5 students. If those 5 students were in 5 different classrooms, and that's let's say with 20 students in it, that's 100 students we're quarantining. So like people need to understand that if we do this, more students will be in those 10-day quarantines at least, you know, throughout the district, you know, so that's just important to note, that it won't be like it is. And we say, you know, 3 people are quarantined. It will say, this class is quarantined, this school is going to be remote for the next 2 weeks. Just a FYI, it's not a scare tactic. This is a reality, and this is something that we've seen in all of the districts. I just always want to be as honest as possible with the information and where we're going. It's doable. It's doable. Just to keep going, just as far as the dates, which we said we weren't really trying to, you know, we are still, again, seeking to get some more information, you know, right away, because that, say, March 22nd is a week, and yesterday was 2 weeks ago. And clearly, the people who decided that that was a good date have no idea the work that it takes to redo schedules, to redo busing, to figure out lunch programs, to figure out just facilities issues, to figure out new cleaning schedules, none of that. And so when I tell you that it is possible for us to do this, if that is your desire, for us to do this, if we can come back March 22nd per se, I want you to know that it is going to be on the backs of every single staff in this district, like blood, sweat, and tears. I just want to be very clear about that. It is a Herculean task. It is doable. We can do it, but it is going to take us to the brink of exhaustion, okay? Just one last thing. We said this last time, and I know you all heard it, and this was a wrinkle that nobody expected. We didn't think we were going to be here. But once we make a decision, whatever decision we make, please don't ask us to ask our teachers to change their schedules another time after this. Please don't ask us to have everybody up in their lives another time after this. Something else may come up, because this was not anybody in here is doing. Understand that. Completely understand that. But if we have the ability to get some stability, we would so appreciate that. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Thank you, Dr. Goodwin. Dr. Blau. Oh, and then Mrs. Heimer.
I was just wondering, when you say come back by March 22nd, what do you mean?
the HR of 4048, the only way that we get a portion of those supplemental funds is to be offering 20 hours of in-person instruction by March 22nd.
Oh, so
Okay.
can I interrupt for a second? And that's the part where we're not sure on that one, you know, what the direction actually is going to be there. There seems to be some question as to whether that will actually continue. We're not sure, but what I do want to focus this conversation on is the safety mitigation strategy, and make sure that, you know, we're giving that some consideration. I think we still need to talk about, you know, the impact of this bill as well, but I think the first step is for us to give some thought to the safety mitigation strategies.
My question, oh my goodness, my question is around that. I guess it's twofold. One is that it sounds like the CDC and the Michigan Department of Education have changed their recommendations, and they have included the wording where feasible. And as Dr. Goodrum pointed out, we already have all of those other layers of mitigation strategies in place. And that has been our protocol since the students came back in January. So that's solid. That's already in place. So I personally feel comfortable relaxing our social distancing reducing our social distancing guidelines based upon this new information, with the awareness, as I've talked to other board members and other teachers and administrators in other districts, exactly as you described, Dr. Goodrum, we do run the risk of having larger groups of students and teachers having to quarantine, and yet coupled with the increase in the number of not just teachers but people in general who have been vaccinated, I feel much more comfortable now than I did even 2 weeks ago, making a change in our mitigation strategies and leaving it to Dr. Goodrum and the rest of the amazing staff that we have here in Farmington to figure out what that's going to look like, and if we're going to do, you know, just increase a certain number of hours and or go to full time or whatever. We'll leave that up to you to determine. I don't feel a sense of urgency around the date of the 22nd, but I would like to give you the latitude to make some different decisions about increasing face-to-face learning without the 6 feet of social distancing requirement.
Thank you, Dr. Blau. Mrs. Heinrich.
Yes, thank you. I really want to thank Dr. Goodrum for taking the time to talk that through, and Dr. Coffin also for just reviewing. And I'm just like taking some notes. And I want to thank our parents too, because, you know, we have a lot of parents advocating for their children, and that's really important. And we hear from parents that they want their children in school, and we hear from the experts that they want the children in school. And I think the consensus of the board is we want to increase students in person as much as possible. And you've said that you've been doing that. When the decisions for the guidelines were in February, I just remember Dr. Goodrum coming to the board meeting and saying you went to Oakland County, and you didn't know if our teachers were going to be able to get the vaccine, and conditions have changed, and you've reached out and there have been opportunities, and so those are circumstances that have changed, and that's the whole problem, is that we're under constantly changing conditions. And the kind of 6 foot really hit me when we came into the building today, and I saw, just like the logistics of operating a school, and And going into the restroom and just seeing there's 3 sinks and only 1 sink is available for social distancing, and I'm running through my mind, you know, when there's so many kids in the school and now there's only 1 person at a time to be able to wash their hands. And so it's hard to really appreciate, you know, all of the logistics, and I just want to express appreciation for those that are in the trenches and have made that happen, because that is so important. But when we're talking about the 6-foot guidelines, and I'm thinking it's time to reduce that, we're not saying you don't have to follow 6 foot if possible. I think it's more the understanding that in order to increase student engagement to 20 hours a week, then we have to allow more students in the classroom. So within the classroom setting, therefore, we might have to shorten the 6 feet down to 3 feet, but those will be controlled situations where the students unfortunately aren't going to be able to put their desks together and share the way they did, and so the teachers have to adapt to different strategies and different ways to engage the students. But in the larger spaces like the cafeterias and the media centers, where it's possible during the lunch hour, then the students will still be able to spread out and follow maybe bigger separations. So it's not just, we don't have to follow that anymore. And so that kind of makes me feel more comfortable knowing that that's going to happen. And the other thing that I kind of want you to address is one of the things that you asked us, Dr. Goodrum, is please, you know, this is going to be terrific to make these changes and we can do it, but don't keep changing. So if we do increase instruction to the 20 hours, that is going to require a disruption in the schedules and the teachers' assignments. Will that require restructuring teacher assignments and student assignments at the elementary level as opposed to the secondary level? I thought that the schedule at the secondary level was more adaptable. Can you address that?
Both will require some changes. So because we had already agreed to bring in additional families at the 3rd trimester for elementary, even though this is a week earlier than the elementary trimester change was supposed to happen. So that's an issue. But it will require some changing of teachers and some scheduling changes. For instance, just one thing that we're looking at, because we're still trying to be as safe as possible, I don't know if I'm making it in the microphone, we're trying to be as safe as possible. So say for elementary, we're looking at possibly 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, so there's still no lunch. And again, just to explain to you all what this 2-week timeline means, the reason why we haven't had noon aides, we haven't had noon supervision, because we have been half day, we cannot hire in 2 weeks noon aides to cover lunch. Not only that, but that is another time at which, you know, that is going to be a more riskier time, just interaction on the playground and things of that nature. So in looking for a solution, one thing that is being considered, no decisions have been made yet because no decisions have been made here yet, but we've been thinking about this since we heard about this bill just last week. So it would be, you know, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week to help mitigate some of that, but that is going to require schedule changes. So yes, anything we do tonight that if we reduce the social distancing guidelines, it is going to require changes at both levels in this, not necessarily in the schedules at secondary, but in some of the teaching. It will be the same schedule, but some of the teaching, unless we decide to do something really radical, which is doubtful based on the amount of time that we have to prepare if we're going to shoot for that date. But yes, but we're aware of it, and we have contingency plans for that. We're not excited about them, but they can happen.
And Dr. Goodrum, if I could just add on to that, our elementary principals have already been working through this. So, and there have already been enough significant changes. So they recognize they're going to have to make those changes. And in conversations with our principals, they understand that and they're prepared to do that. I think that it's also important for the board to remember each of our elementary buildings is set up a little bit different depending on the community. You know, a 70% in-person is set up a little bit different than the 40%, and it was a response to our communities. The other piece to this, though, in lessening the 6-foot social distancing, allowing for 2 to 3 feet, allowing more students to come in, this change also is going to impact our students who choose to stay fully remote. So as you know, we had our learning at a distance schedule when everyone was remote, and then that had to be significantly altered for them in order to accommodate bringing students in person and then our teaching assignments. So by being able to reduce the social distancing, even with the significant changes in our buildings having to work together to make sure that we have enough in-person instructors as well as a balance with our remote, it is going to benefit our remote learners because then they will now have a longer time of learning as well.
Mrs. Smith?
Thank you, Ms. Weems. I have the same frustration as Dr. Goodrum has. To hold a dollar over a district's head, especially a district that is not poor. If this was one of these other districts, I could see that. But to hold this over our heads, to force us to make this decision, and what people don't understand is legislators don't do what you all do. Your jobs are to make sure that these students and these parents are accommodated to go into these classrooms and get a highly qualified education. Yeah, this board has been beaten up from top to bottom because of the decisions that we have made. I have done, and I've been sitting here quiet, but it's really making me upset to know that these legislators are throwing us a box of quote-unquote government cheese to think that we're just going to go and jump through hoops for whatever they want us to do. I have believed in following the mandate of whatever the governor wants us to do. As far as lifting mitigations, we as a board, we are in a situation where whatever we do, we are going to be judged. If we say 6 feet, they're going to want 3. If we say 3 feet, they're going to say 2. If we say 2, they're going to say, you know what, we don't want any, and we don't want our kids wearing masks. I understand that people want these mitigations to be lifted because most of the people have said, well, we want them lifted, not because we want our children to socialize and we want our children to be with their friends. The way this is going right now, in all retrospect, we will never be normal again. There are variants of the other virus out. What people don't understand is our teachers are being vaccinated, but our students are not. So at the end of the day, you have teachers that have specialties. Our gym teachers, our teachers that teach foreign language, those are things that you all have been working hard to do to get, now we've got to turn around and jump through a fire hoop to get this together so that our students can have what they need. Not only to change scheduling, I understand that our teachers are doing the best. I understand our principals are doing the best. I understand you all are doing the best. But at the end of the day, I don't want anybody coming back saying, well, you know what? We're going to recall that board, or we're going to do this, or they don't know what they're doing. You all have done your due diligence, and you're working hard to do what's right for these kids. So at the end of the day, where I'm at with this is, I have no problem if I'm leaving that up to you all. If you want 20 hours, I understand, but I cannot go and have a group of students sit in here because someone wants the next party that they have in the elementary. I'm sorry. So now if we've got to do this, we got to do it right and stop asking for us to change things and asking these principals and these teachers to do what they have been doing for the last year. I'm thanking you and your team and this cabinet for trying to get this done and getting it done right. And this makes no sense. This community needs to know. March 22nd, we send these kids back. Then we have spring break. Then we come back. Our seniors graduate in May. So you just want people to be in school just to say you went back to school. Do what you have to do to get the 20 hours in. But let's think about our specialty teachers. Yep. Let's think about getting more custodians, our bus drivers, our noon supervisors, which make $10.25 an hour. Work with our specialty teachers, because I'm really concerned and worried. And I want to thank you all for all the hard work that you all have put in. And on another note, I really wish people would stop going back and saying, because my phone has blown up all day, people need to stop saying that board has made their decision. You don't know what this board has done. Because before this bill was passed, I wasn't voting for this. And I'm still in a situation where I don't know what I want to do. When you put those rumors out there that this board is going to do this puts us in a bad situation to think that we have been voting and doing this behind the scenes, and we've been collaborating, and we have not. I have talked to a couple of my colleagues, and at the end of the day, I'm still torn. I am still torn, but we got to get these kids educated. So please, Dr. Coffin, I don't care what you got to do. Please make sure these specialty teachers are taken care of. Please make sure that the staff is taken care of and our principals are taken care of. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Mr. Rich.
Thank you, Ms. Weems. There is a lot out there, and a lot that the community has said to us is stuff we already know, and it's not like it's stuff that we haven't been saying to ourselves for weeks, months. So have you. I, along with, I'm sure all of my colleagues, our entire community, should be angry about these hoops we are being forced to jump through for funding that was provided, supposed to be, without hoops to jump through. And the fact that was put in there it's despicable. I mean, it's putting on all these extra conditions so that funding that is supposed to be to help our students doesn't actually get to our school districts. And looking at the March 22nd deadline that was presented, that's less than 2 weeks from when the bill was signed and put into law. Clearly, the authors of this bill have no idea how districts are run and the amount of effort and work and time it takes to change course. And that's something that we have heard from our administration, we've heard from cabinet for weeks, especially when we've been looking at how we might need to pivot into certain different scenarios. And here's the thing. Here's what we have been told by the CDC, by the state, and by a lot of parents that that the spread, as long as we are following mitigation standards, is not happening in the school buildings. It's happening in the community. So here is what that actually means. It means it's on all of you in the community, everyone who's demanding that we go back face to face, to not be having these giant parties, be traveling and throwing caution into the wind, because that's where students are going to be getting it and then bringing it to their friends and making us end up having to close classrooms if we're decreasing mitigation standards and then have to quarantine students. So if we are going to be decreasing our safety standards, that puts it on all of you who are demanding that we do so to actually follow the guidelines, because that is the only way we are going to get through this. Just because we see a light at the end of the tunnel doesn't mean we're out of the tunnel, and certainly doesn't mean that that light isn't a train. Here is what we need to do next, is if we are doing this, then we need to do it right. We need to take the guidance from our administration, and we need to understand that we're not going to be back to normal. Just because we are increasing face-to-face instruction doesn't mean we are having these giant ice cream socials and pizza parties and hug circles. It's just not feasible right now. We will get there, but that's not going to be this school year. And we are working, and our district is working so extremely hard to make it so that we can get there, but we need to let the work get done. We need to let numbers go lower. We need to follow all of these standards. And we've heard from teachers who are worried about certain mitigation standards possibly not being followed as closely as they need to be. What we need is a way for teachers in our district to be able to report these things, because we need to make sure that we are on top of this. We can't let anything slide. If we are going to be decreasing standards, we need to make sure that those standards are still met, the ones that we are making. So I know a lot of you have heard where I've been coming from for months on this. But if we are going to do this, we need to make sure we're doing it right. And we need to take our lead from this administration, whose job it is to give us these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. Dr. Blau. Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Blau, would you mind if Mrs. Fox went first? She hasn't had an opportunity.
I'm good.
You sure? Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Mrs. Fox. Dr. Blau?
A couple of additional things. Ms. Smith, I agree with you that 100% that we shouldn't be jumping through hoops just for dollars. And we need to make our decisions irregardless of the dollar piece. What we really need to focus on is what is going to be in the best interest of our students, both in terms of health and safety and also their education, as you pointed out, Ms. Smith. And so, and as you also pointed out, Ms. Smith, the dates, it's ridiculous, March 22nd, when a week later, we're gonna go, 5 days later, we have a break that would give us an extra 2 weeks to hire, new aides. And if everyone in the state is scrambling, it is going to be so difficult because everybody's going to be trying to find new aides and all of, additional bus drivers, custodians, and whatnot. So at least that would give us 4 weeks instead of just, the 2 weeks, as you pointed out. I know money is important, but the most important thing, I think, for all of us on this board is what's best for our students. And so I encourage us as a board and our administration to focus on that. What is in the best interest of our students? What is feasible? And And whatever that looks like, I feel comfortable as long as Mr. Rich, as you pointed out, we continue with all of our other mitigation practices, masks, partitions, and all of that. If we continue with that, I feel comfortable relaxing the social distancing guidelines and then leaving it to the administration to figure out, are we going to, just add Fridays, or are we going to go to 20 hours? Are we going to go to full-time? Whatever that looks like, I leave it to you and defer to your expertise to figure that piece out. I also have one other thing I'd like to share, and thank you, Ms. Smith, for pointing this out as well to the community. We are legally not allowed to even have conversations or exchange emails or texts if there are more than 3 of us involved in the conversation. The only time and the only place we are allowed to discuss these issues together is right here during our board meetings. And we are very strict with ourselves and one another about making sure we abide by these laws. It's called the Open Meetings Act, and we are very, very careful to make sure that we are not, that we are sticking within all of those guidelines. So the idea that we would be discussing and deciding ahead of time, that is just wholly untrue. It's not possible. We're not allowed legally to have the conversations and to discuss and deliberate ahead of time. So when we come to a board meeting, we don't know what is in each other's head. We only know as a result of the discussions and when we vote. So I'd like the community to keep in mind that the only time that board members are legally allowed to discuss and decide upon district issues is during these board meetings. Remember that these are public board meetings, but they aren't public meetings. They're board meetings. We have to do all of our discussion and deliberation in public so that we are completely transparent. This also is one of the reasons why we have made changes in terms of our public comment portion, because we learned last Tuesday at our workshop, we need the time during these meetings to have these discussions, because it is the only time we're legally allowed to have these discussions. So we need to recoup more of our board meeting time to have these important discussions and make the best decisions we can for the students of our district. Thank you.
Mrs. Smith. Those students that, and this is directed to you, Dr. Coffin, and to you, Dr. Goodrum. If the students are already remote and they sign that contract, will parents not be allowed to let them go face-to-face? Should they stay remote for the remainder of the year?
That's a great question. So at the elementary, depending on, if the board takes action on doing some of the relaxing of the 6-foot social distancing, we will send a survey out to all of our elementary families to make that selection so that they're fully aware of what they would be coming back to. We may have some families who are currently in person who maybe would go remote because they're more comfortable. They were more comfortable with the 6-foot and then they would stay remote, and then vice versa. So we want to make sure our families have that.
So are we asking those parents that are remote, because I know that this email is going to just skyrocket. Are we, if those parents are remote, do they have the option to go face-to-face, or they have to stay remote?
At the elementary, they will have the option to come back in person.
Okay, not middle school or high school, correct?
So at the secondary level right now, we're going to confirm that the students want to stay in person. At the middle school and high school, we have been constantly bringing in, I just worked with a couple principals just this week on bringing some students who were remote now in person because there's been some changes in their household where they feel more comfortable. So we're continuing to work through that. We'd have to look a little bit at the space. It's a little bit different at the secondary, but for sure at the elementary, anybody who wants to come in person will. At the secondary, I think we're pretty close. Like I said, last time, more switched to remote instead of in person, so.
Thank you.
Yes.
May I say one other thing? It was about, it was an earlier comment. I wanted Mr. Rich to know, we already have a reporting process for our staff who see any other staff or admin not exercising, not utilizing our mitigation procedure. So we have a process because that was a concern that people had early on. So we do have a process, and Ms. Smith can provide more information on that if you'd like, now or later. But Dr. Blau, I have to let you know, even when we think about this additional time, and these are when the logistics get in the way. One of the things that we're going to have to do as we look at increasing, if that is what happens, is like changing up bail times, possibly, because we are down approximately a third of our bus drivers this year from last year. And we have been trying to hire bus drivers all year. When I went to visit East today, and East on their sign says, now hiring bus drivers and bus aides, like we're advertising it everywhere. Same thing as Ms. Smith said earlier about neonates. Like, we have been trying to hire people. I just want you to know we have a very difficult time right now with getting that additional staff that may be needed for some of the logistics for some ideas that we have. So as we consider different options, these are all things that we have to consider, realistically.
Right. I want to, Mrs. Heinrich.
You can go before me if you want to. I just wanted to just kind of reaffirm in my mind what I heard. I heard Dr. Goodrum say that in order to continue to increase to 20 hours, bring more students in, is a affirmation from the board that with all the mitigation strategies in place, that 6-foot line, you need us to come to a consensus that we're ready to say, because of the changing circumstances that you've heard, that you're comfortable with reducing the 6-foot line when you have to. And so it's like 6 foot when possible rather than strictly 6 foot. So that's one thing that we would have to come to a consensus on tonight. And then the other thing is, even though it will require disruption of schedules and things like that, the central office and the cabinet is willing to do that, and you've talked to your teachers and the staff, and that's something that you think that if it was in the best interest of the students in the community, that's something that you could make happen, if you thought that if it was in the best interest of the district.
Yes.
Okay, and then can we, and Dr. Coffin, just because I think as a board, we know how hard our teachers are working, and that Friday has always come up a lot in the public comment and things like that. And just to kind of review with us what are the importance and the need and what our teachers are doing on Friday, because they don't have a 4-day work week, and they're probably working harder on Fridays than they are during the week. And just not too much detail, but just a little summary of the importance and the things that that they're doing for the students and to improve with all the challenges that they're being faced with.
Yes, absolutely. So our teachers are teaching on Fridays. So in the elementary, they're meeting anywhere from 1 to 2 hours with either a large group or small group of their students. At the secondary, they're meeting for over 4 hours, and then they have additional meetings, more small group and individual for some intervention groups. So our teachers are teaching. In addition to that, they are meeting with their PLCs, and they're learning they're getting professional development to learn how to continue to use tools. I mean, remember, Canvas was brand new to our teachers just in August, and so many of our teachers are teaching both in person and remote. They need time to be able to build those lessons. They're built a little bit differently. So it's professional development, time to work in their PLCs, actual time teaching, live teaching, designing their asynchronous lessons, and then anything else that they can fit in there. So it is really a valuable time for them to continue to support our students.
I want to thank everybody for the healthy discussion. I heard a lot. I heard that that the board has an interest, still has an interest in increasing in-person learning. I heard an acknowledgement that there's been a change in circumstances, that conditions have changed, that the CDC and the state guidance indicate and data indicate that spread is not happening in schools, but it is happening in the community. I'm hearing concern about social spread impacting us and the number of quarantines. I'm also hearing an acknowledgement of the increase in vaccinations. I heard that we're very unhappy about the state requirement and the unrealistic timeframes, and I'm kind of getting the sense from the board that we're not interested in those unrealistic timeframes. But then again, that we are interested in in-person learning, and there's a sense that we're interested in relaxing the standards, keeping, standards, but not the strictest standards that we had before. And as Mrs. Heinrich said, I think that we probably need some action, because previous action that we took, specifically kind of made it apparent that we were interested in maintaining those safety guidelines. So if that's something that has changed, I think we should be in a position to formally make that change, if that is the consensus of the board. If that is the point that we're at right now. Mr. Rich?
I just believe that we do have something on the agenda for action items. So if we don't have any further questions for our administration, we will have a time for discussion after a motion is made. And so I would encourage board members to speak their piece then.
Yep. The other thing that I want to make mention of, though, is that, there's the one matter on reducing the safety mitigation guidelines that we originally put in place. If that is the action that the board decides to take, I think we should also give the district some direction. So when we say increase in-person learning, what are we talking about? Are we talking about number of hours? Are we talking about, I want to make sure that we're clear so that there is there's the avoidance of doubt, right? So, because we've asked for an increase in in-person learning, for the past several weeks. And, I think the district has made attempts to do that, which have not clearly been the point at which we wanted it to be, right? They're not satisfactory to date. So the last thing that we want to do is take some action and still have the same results. So when we get to that discussion, I think we would also want to give some consideration to, making explicit the direction that we want the district to take. So seeing no further discussion, I think we're ready to move into the next area of our agenda, which is public comment.
Could we take a short restroom break?
We can. That's a good point. We will take a 5-minute break. It is now 8:30 by my time. We will reconvene at 8:35, and at that point, we will open up public comment. Thank you, Dr. Blau. We're now in recess. Welcome back. Thank you for allowing us to take that break. We are now at item 8 of our agenda, public comment. Mrs. Buckley, would you please open up public comment?
Thank you. At the February 23rd board meeting, I watched the budget amendment presentation that indicated our fund balance rose an additional $7 million. And this was in addition to the $3.4 million from last year that we learned from our audit in the fall. This means that in the last 9 months, our fund balance has increased by over $10 million and now sits above 20% for the first time in over a decade. In that 16-slide presentation, a series of factors were listed to explain this rise in our fund balance. But nowhere to be found in the slides, and nowhere mentioned by the presenter, was the fact that your employees took concessions in order to achieve that financial outcome. I mentioned to this board previously that when the VI.A. took concessions this summer, Dr. Herrera indicated if cuts weren't so bad and more funding would appear, that he would do something to make things right. And I made those comments when I was only aware of the $3.4 million increase in fund balance. I cannot adequately describe to you how demoralizing it was for your employees to see that we had kept our salary schedule frozen at the payment level from 2009, with movement on the steps once again frozen, only to see the district financial picture dramatically improved without a single mention of the sacrifices of your teachers, paras, bus drivers, all of the employees that help keep this district financially stable. Last summer, the VI.A. was haggled over providing longevity to teachers with 15 years experience in the district. The total cost of that was $8,000. We spent hours bargaining to avoid an additional $8,000 cut on top of our freezes, only to see the district has saved $10 million. In the discussion that followed the presentation, board members asked questions about spending this money on summer programming, and it was indicated that based on MASB training, something like this should be spent on something special. I'm here to tell you that your employees are that something special, and they've been sacrificing the financial future of their own families to protect the finances of this district for over a decade. Honor the words from your previous superintendent, and please honor your employees now. Don't wait until March 25th when we begin bargaining a successor agreement for next year. The concessions were unnecessary. Your employees are feeling that economic burden. Your fund balance currently sits well above your own established threshold. The last time our fund balance was this high, state legislators took notice, and they said that clearly they don't need to increase school funding since districts are just putting money in the bank. Consider the fact in your own budget parameters worksheet tonight, you noted you moved $600,000 into a fund to buy new buses, even though bond dollars are available for this. But in negotiations, you froze your bus driver's salary, among other concessions. And now you don't have enough bus drivers to drive the buses to get the kids to school, but you plan to have $1 million in the bank for buses in the future. Tonight, you consider relaxing your own mitigation strategies in order to preserve more funding from the state. At what point does that funding reach the employees who are taking all of the risk? At what point does this board take a chance on us? At what point will we recognize our employees with more than words? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Hello, I'm here to comment on 2 topics. The return to 100% in-person learning and the land school application. According to the President and our Governor, by way of her new policies, and I quote, "A vaccine will be available for every U.S. adult who wants one by the end of May." With this said, why is our district putting resources and money toward a virtual or remote option for the 21-22 school year? After the past year, it is very clear that students will not receive the education they deserve until all students return to a traditional in-person, everyday learning model. There is no reason a remote option should be offered September 2021. My second topic now, with the knowledge that I again quote, "A vaccine will be available for every U.S. adult who wants one by the end of May," why is our district putting resources and money toward land school? I have read all of the material on land school, including some not provided directly by FPS. This application, tool, whatever you wish to call it, is both unnecessary for the future and an invasion of my young adults' privacy rights. It is also completely contrary to what most parents wish to develop in their high school student before college or the job market. Just to list a few, the ability to make his or her own decisions about instructional attentiveness, distractions, and study habits to develop personal responsibility, accountability, and more. This application should not be implemented at all for high school students. Furthermore, my student uses a private laptop since the district-provided Chromebook is so slow. This won't continue if you proceed with land school, thereby having a negative impact on her learning, having to use a much slower Chromebook. Finally, I simply do not believe many of the privacy statements made by the district community FAQ under land school privacy, questions 14 through 22. The district is crossing a line here that many parents do not appreciate and do not support. Over the past long year, a list has formed of reasons to move my student to another school. In August 2020, there was only one reason my student stayed in the district. The reason was Joe Green, who convinced me to stay at North. I hesitate to say this, but parents know that students in other districts and at private schools have received a better education during the past year. I hesitate because I know our teachers are working very hard. However, my job is to advocate for my family and my student for high bar academics. In conclusion, I do not support the use of land school for high school students. If this goes forward, along with the other concerns I have about the education my daughter is receiving, I will naturally reconsider our school choice for next year. I know many parents are making this same decision now. I truly wish our district would focus on getting students back in the buildings, on delivering the highest possible level of education, and on raising the academic bar throughout our district.
3 minutes.
Leave the parent monitoring, redirecting, controlling.
Mr. Rich, did you want me to do the timing? You got it? Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckley. We appreciate you. We will now move on to action items. The first action item is the athletic field sound system bid and award recommendation. Is there a motion?
We're in the action item now.
Mrs. Heinrich?
I move that the Board of Education approve the bid award as outlined in the letter dated February 15th, 2021 from Plant Moran for installation of sound systems at the high school athletic fields to Soundcom in the amount of $60,585. Funds to come from the Capital Projects Building Site and Site 2018 Fund.
Support.
Motion to approve the bid and award recommendation for the athletic field sound system made by Mrs. Heinrich, supported by Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith, may we have a roll call?
Yes, please. Well, yes. Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Ms. Henrich?
Yes.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems?
I am a yes.
Your motion passes.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. The next action item is bid pack 2 for Lanigan, Gill, and Forest. Is there a motion? Mrs. Heinrich?
I move that the Board of Education award bid pack number 2 for Lanigan, Gill, and Forest as outlined in the March 9th, 2021 letters from Plant Moran Cressa and McCarthy Smith in the amount of $5,501,711, funds to come from the Capital Projects Building and Site 2020 Fund.
Is there
Support.
There's been a motion made by Mrs. Heinrich and supported by Mrs. Smith to approve bid pack 2 for Lanigan, Gill, and Forest. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Smith, can we have a roll call?
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
Ms. Henrich?
Yes.
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems?
I'm a yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. The next item is the approval of revised general appropriations resolution. Mrs. Heinrich.
I move that the Board of Education approve the revised general appropriations resolution for the 2020-2021 budget amendment as presented at the February 23rd, 2021 regular meeting and waive the reading of the resolution.
Support.
There's a motion made by Mrs. Heinrich, supported by Mr. Rich, to approve the general appropriations resolution or budget amendment. Is there discussion? Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote?
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Ms. Henrich?
Yes.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems?
I am a yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. The next item is policy audit revisions. This is our second reading. Mr. Rich.
Thank you. This item was presented for first reading at the February 23rd, 2021 regular meeting. I move that the Board of Education approve the policy revisions for policies 2002, 2007, 4003, 4005, 5003, 6007, and 6008 as presented.
Support.
Motion to approve the policy audit revisions was made by Mr. Rich and supported by Mrs. Smith. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Fox.
Mike, yes, I'd like to know a little bit more about the policy audit revisions. How often are these revisions? Can at any point a board member can open up and make recommendations as needed?
Yes. That is something that can be done, especially through the policy committee.
Thank you.
So just to add to that as well, the, sorry, it's hard to hear with that. Our lawyers, our attorneys, send to us recommended policy changes once or twice a year based on their knowledge of rule changes, laws, and all of that sort of stuff. So they send us, and that's what this is. Every year, twice a year actually, they send us recommended changes. In addition to that, to your point, our policy committee meets regularly and will review and evaluate our policies and make recommendations to the board for policy changes. Any board member can make suggestions for policy changes anytime throughout the rest of the year.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Smith?
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Ms. Henrich?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems?
I'm a yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And I realize that I passed over item D, which is approval of resolution to hold budget public hearing. Mr. Rich.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution to hold the public hearing on the fiscal year 2022 budget and waive the reading of the resolution.
Support.
There was a motion by Mr. Rich to approve the resolution to hold a budget hearing, a public hearing, supported by Mrs. Smith. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Can I get a roll call?
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Ms. Henrich?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems?
I'm a yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Next, item F is policy updates. This is the second reading. Mr. Rich?
Thank you. This is the policy updates. This item was presented for a first reading at the February 23rd, 2021 regular meeting. I move that the Board of Education approve the policy updates to the bylaws and policy 2006 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Rich, seconded by Mrs. Fox, to approve the policy updates. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Smith?
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Ms. Henrich?
Yes.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. And finally, our last action item is related to increases in in-person learning. So for this one, we had a discussion earlier about the need to consider, if the board wants to consider further increases in in-person discussion, the need to consider a change to our mitigation strategy. So at this time, we'll entertain a motion if there is consensus. Dr. Blau?
I move that the board update its current mitigation practices, including relaxing the 6 feet of social distancing in classrooms and throughout the school day to be more in line with updated guidance from the state and the CDC, and grants the superintendent the authority to make safety, mitigation, and logistical decisions for the district to allow for increasing of in-person learning.
Is there support?
Support.
There is a motion made by Dr. Blau, supported by Mrs. Heinrich, to update our current mitigation practices, including the 6 feet of social distancing, in order to maximize the goal of in-person learning. Is there any discussion?
I said to allow for.
To allow for?
To allow for increasing in-person learning.
I will restate. There is a motion made by Dr. Blau, supported by Mrs. Heinrich, to update mitigation practices, including the 6 feet of social distancing, to be more in line with updated guidance from the state and the CDC, and grant the superintendent the authority to make safety mitigation and logistical decisions in an effort to maximize the goal of in-person learning.
That's not what I said.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I said, I move that the board update its current mitigation practices, including 6 feet of social distancing in classrooms and throughout the school day, to be more relaxing the 6 feet, in line with updated guidance from the state and the CDC, and grants the superintendent the authority to make safety mitigation and logistical decisions for the district to allow for increasing in-person learning.
Okay.
As a point of information, could you, if you changed what was do you have written down what the motion was?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you make changes?
Am I not allowed to do that?
Oh, no, you are. You
absolutely
definitely
can.
are. We just want to make sure that we have it properly
So
recorded.
Okay, I will, I've got it right here.
Okay, great.
I'm happy to accept that motion as read by Dr. Blau.
Sorry.
Moving to relax the safety mitigation strategies. Seconded by Mrs. Heinrich. Is there discussion? Mrs. Smith?
Could you read your motion, because the motion that we have is different?
Yep.
And I wanted to make sure before I voted on something, if that's fair.
Yes.
To my
absolutely.
colleagues.
The two things I've changed, it's
Hold on, let me
the
put my-
first version.
Yep.
Instead of including, I clarified to relaxing the 6 feet. So I move that the board update its current mitigation practices, including relaxing the 6 feet. So including relaxing the 6 feet of social distancing. And the only other change I made is at the very, the second to last sentence where it says district. I took out the in an effort to maximize the goal of, and instead I added to allow for increasing, so that
Okay.
we give the superintendent the latitude to determine what that will look like.
I got it. So thank you for clarifying that. We are moving then to, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, to update current mitigation practices, including relaxing 6 feet of social distancing, to be more in line with updated guidance, granting the superintendent the authority to make safety mitigation and logistical decisions for the district to allow for increase in in-person learning.
To allow for increasing in-person learning.
And that was seconded by Mrs. Heinrich. Mrs. Heinrich, do you have?
I do have a comment or a point or discussion or whatever you want to call it, but when I just want to make sure that my thought process is in alignment of what we're saying, because to allow for increasing in-person learning, my thought process is we really know the damage, that students is causing not being in school. And so increasing student learning, in my thought process, is increasing the number of hours as much as possible, and also increasing the opportunities to bring students into in-person, because I think that is really important, because there's so many students that are suffering true damage, and understanding that not every family wants their child in-person learning, and also understanding that if the relaxing of the 6 foot, there might be families that are comfortable, more comfortable, not as comfortable, and have that opportunity to move to virtual. So I don't want to, we locked in the 6 feet, and we're making that, we're dotting that line now. And I also want to kind of have guidelines, but to kind of dot that line or soften that decision-making process, and not changing on whims back and forth, but really making changes and best decisions for each individual student.
Thank you. Mr. Rich?
I would like to make an amendment to the current motion.
So we have a motion on the table.
There is a motion on the table, which was seconded. And so I want to make an amendment to this motion as part of the, to add a furthermore, to add a second part.
Is that okay with you? Okay.
And this amendment is to add, furthermore, I move that the district continue with the hybrid in-person model and learning at a distance full remote option for families for both grades K through 5 and grades 6 through 12, with the goal of reaching at least 20 hours of in-person instruction for hybrid learners by April 15th.
I feel those need to be 2 separate motions.
If that is the will of the board, that is perfectly okay.
So there's no second for that. I'm not seeing a second for that.
I was getting ready to second,
Oh,
but since,
I'll withdraw my amendment and allow it to be voted as a second
okay.
motion.
Separate motion?
Sure.
Okay. So we currently have a motion on the table. I'm going to repeat it. The motion on the table is to update current mitigation practices, including relaxing 6 feet of social distancing in classrooms and throughout the school, to be more in line with updated guidance from the state and the CDC, and provide the superintendent the authority to make the safety mitigation and logistical decisions for the district to allow for an increase in in-person learning. And that was seconded by Mrs. Heinrich. That does allow for what you talked about, Mrs. Heinrich, which is both the increase in in-person learning for those that are learning in person, and for, provides more of an opportunity to address remote learners.
Right, and it also allows for increase in hours, too.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Okay, I think we're ready for a roll call.
Ms. Hendrich?
Yes.
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Thank you to this board for having the robust dialogue and the conversation, and thank you also for your continued commitment to evaluating data and the research and continuing to have the conversation, over the past several weeks. At this time, I think we do need to give some consideration to providing some direction to the board as with respect to what does increasing in-person learning mean? And I think that Mr. Rich had a motion that he wanted to make.
Sure. I move that the district continue with the hybrid in-person model and learning at a distance, full remote option for families for both grades K through 5 and grades 6 through 12, with the goal of reaching at least 20 hours of in-person instruction for hybrid learners by April 15th.
Support.
There's a motion to move that the district continue with the hybrid in-person model and the learning at a distance model for families for grades K through 12, with the goal of reaching at least 20 hours of in-person instruction for hybrid learners by April 15th. Is there discussion? Dr. Blau.
I'm concerned about specifying the number of hours as well as the date. I just have concern about that in terms of tying the hands of our superintendent and central office and building principals and teachers in terms of coming up with creative options for how to increase student learning. Because what if they're able to do 18 hours but not 20, and they get enough bus drivers and new aides to do 18 hours but not the 20. So I have concern about specifying. I am confident that our current administration, our superintendent and our current administration are going to do everything that they can that is in the best interest of our students and getting our students back for more face-to-face learning, and I would really like to trust them, give them the latitude to figure out how to do that in terms of hours and dates.
I saw another hand. Mr. Rich.
Sure. So the language of this motion was made, my understanding is, with guidance from our administration, as well as the phrasing of at least 20 hours. And I think what the reason for this motion is it's one thing to say go forward, but we also need to be able to provide some kind of direction outside of forward. There's 180 degrees of forward, and we need to be able to narrow and give some guidance to the administration as to what the board wants.
Mrs. Heinrich?
Yeah, just reading the motion and the logistics for the 20 hours, I kind of thought it was the understanding that it was per guidance of our governor, was saying that, she wanted 20 hours and just a point of information that, as a board, we said that decisions should be made in the best interest of all the parties involved and using data. And one thing, and this is not to be meant political or anything, but one thing that I respect about our governor is that she has always surrounded herself by experts and always looked at the data and always explained her decisions and her reasonings and the tough decisions based on data. And so that 20 hours was kind of in my mind, and you can clarify that if that's not what it was. And then the date March was thrown out there, so we're saying by April 15th means it could happen sooner than April 15th. April 15th is just, and the question is, I don't have the school calendar in front of me, so why was by April 15th put, thank you.
Sorry. So, as we learned all these new things about this legislation, which is again signed today, but in trying to work through our, possible plans and possible scenarios, and the impact to our district, and the impact to the resources that were going to be available to our students. It is important to note that the only reason that we ask for flexibility with the date in this case is in case the legislation changes. Because at the time, with the signing, and as we heard earlier, I think Mrs. Williams was saying that the governor is still looking into the constitutionality and enforceability of certain components, including the component to have 20 hours of instruction by March 22nd. With that in mind, know that if this passes, so right now you all have already loosened the mitigation procedures. It is our full intention to proceed with 20 hours, at least 20 hours of instruction by March 22nd. However, if tomorrow we hear that the governor has pushed that date back, the reason that April 15th was chosen is that March 22nd is the week before spring break. So that next week is spring break. We don't want to start the first day after spring break. We wanted to start the following Monday, a week after spring break was over. That's how April 15th came about.
So that makes sense. I just was wondering if it was tied into a marking period, or because I thought spring break was the end of March. So that makes perfect sense. So thank you for the clarification.
Dr. Blau? So is this motion, are you comfortable with this motion?
This motion allows us to do what, it will allow us to return 20 hours by March 22nd, but it also allows us to postpone that if an opportunity presents itself legislatively.
Okay. In that case, if this language and these hours and dates are comfortable, if this is something you are comfortable with, I am comfortable supporting it.
Is there any other discussion? And I think Dr. Goodwin would probably like to qualify a bit here. I don't think the district is comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah, I am very uncomfortable with your continued use of the word comfortable. I'm like,
okay, I'm sorry.
I'm not saying that. No, but that's not what I was going to say. Okay. I have a question about one of the words. So depending on what we do, and I'm not sure how this gets wordsmith, but, so depending on how you define the word hybrid, because most people think of the word hybrid like half of the students are in school, cohorting and all of that. If we're 20 hours, it's not going to be cohorting. There will be some, it will be primarily live. There still may be some asynchronous, so I guess you consider that, or there may be some remote, so I guess you could consider that in some way a hybrid, because some of the instruction, less of the instruction, but some of the instruction may still be remote. So I just want to make sure you understand that, because we're basically talking about, the live, most of the primary modality of instruction for the students in this model will be face-to-face.
So I just want to chime in here that we've defined hybrid as those students who are currently in person, not 100%. So that's how we've talked about hybrid in our instructional delivery method and in our plan that we share with the state. Just wanted to make that clarification. Mrs. Heinrich.
Yeah, I just want to express appreciation for Dr. Goodrum and her staff for This is not an easy, just flip the switch. And so I want to express appreciation for your willingness to do what you feel is in the best interest of our students. And also, when we're saying at least 20 hours, then we're not limiting you to, we're giving you the opportunity to continue to increase that as the school year goes on, if it's feasible and if circumstances continue to change. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
So just a couple points of clarification. I'm hearing that, a little bit of concern over tying the district's hands, because I get the sense that this board doesn't want to do that. They want to give the district the flexibility to do what it needs to do. I want to remind the board that a few weeks or maybe even a month or two ago, when we had these conversations in early January, the district asked us to make a decision, as early as possible and sort of commit to that decision so that we wouldn't have all of this constant change, because it's very disruptive for administration and it's very disruptive for our students. The district told us back then, though, that if they were to make a change, that they would prefer to do that, a natural transition point would be after spring break. So they previously told us that. I think this is kind of consistent with that previous communication. I do appreciate the concern over tying of hands in, thinking about if the board were, open to this, and as part of this discussion, I expected that it would come up, that, we want to give flexibility. So rather, what you don't see in the proposed motion is something that says we want kids to go to school 5 days a week or 4 days a week, or we want Fridays open, or we want, like, that level of detail and specificity is, not where the board should sit. We should tell the district what we want them to do and give them some parameters, and then allow them to go forth and do that. Now, one thing that I do want to make clear to the board and to the public is increasing instruction is going to be disruptive, okay? And so this may change schedules. It may change teachers. It may impact how remote learners learn. It may increase screen time. It may be disruptive for families, right, if times change and all of that sort of stuff. So this is not a decision that we take into lightly, but I think I'm getting the consensus that most people agree that increasing in-person learning is important, and we want to have as much people who want that option to have access to it. So we also said that we wanted to prioritize elementary, and it sounds like, elementary parents are still getting the opportunity to make that decision. So I'm seeing
I apologize. I don't know, has a motion been made?
Motion has been made.
Okay, I'm sorry, we've been talking for a minute. If someone would kindly amend the motion to change April 15th to April 12th? I thought April 15th was the Monday. Not sure how I got that in my head, but it's a Thursday. And
Sure.
So we would like to come back on a Monday
Yeah.
if someone would
Well, I
kindly-
mean, but it says at least until, so
Yeah.
we still
could
have the
come back on this one,
flexibility,
yeah.
but we can change it. Mr. Rich?
I think because March 15th is a Monday, maybe.
Maybe, that's what happened.
That's probably what I was thinking. I apologize.
Sure. I'd like to, actually, since we haven't had any, I'll just make the amendment.
Yep.
I move to amend that date change from April 15th to April 12th.
Until what?
April 12th.
April 12th?
April 12th. Okay, that's the Monday after, the week after spring break.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Heinrich. So now, we now have a motion to continue with the hybrid in-person model and learning a remote model for families.
The point of order, we need to vote on the amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's vote on the amendment. There was support for the amendment. We now have an amendment to the first motion. We will take, is there any discussion on the amendment? Okay. We will now vote on the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Rich.
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
Ms. Henrich?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So we now have a motion to continue with a hybrid in-person model and learning at a distance option for families for K through 12 with the goal of reaching at least 20 hours of in-person instruction for hybrid learners by April 12th. We are entertaining discussion, or we have no further discussion. Okay. Thank you again. We are ready for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Rich?
Yes.
Ms. Henrich?
Yes.
Dr. Blau?
Yes.
I myself, yes. Ms. Weems?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. With that, we have finished our action items. I appreciate this board and your continued engagement. I know this is a lot, and I appreciate you taking the time to really think and consider this. We'll now move to the consent agenda. Mr. Rich.
Thank you. I move that the Board of Education approve the March 9th, 2021 consent agenda as follows. A, the approval of minutes for February 23rd, 2021 regular meeting and the March 2nd, 2021 board workshop.
Support.
There was a motion by Mr. Rich, supported by Mrs. Smith, to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll now move to item 11, reports from board representatives. Do we have any reports from board representatives? Mrs. Heinrich?
I have a report on the OCSBA meeting, which Oakland County School Board Association. They met on March 3rd. It was a virtual dinner meeting. Terry Weems, Mabel Fox, Cheryl Blau, and myself were in attendance. They gave a pretty detailed legislative update, and I assume that Zach Rich would address this in his legislative report, so I'm not going to report on that. The DEI committee presented the 21-day equity challenge proposal to the executive board, and the board of directors were supportive of the proposal, but not the timing. They said that many districts are experiencing a continued uncertainty with the pandemic and all that put on everybody's plate, and they felt that boards of education and administration would get more out of the program in a less stressful time frame. So they're going to wait until September in order to launch this program. Birgit McQuistren was elected as the MASB Region 8 Director, and that was the candidate that our board supported. They had a note that the health department was going to issue guidelines regarding prom and graduation, and they didn't say what those were. And then Dr. J. Marks presented an excellent program on systemic racism, injustice, inequity, and part of the presentation, we were given the 4 if statements and challenged to answer one of them and sent home for into breakout rooms, which was really, I thought was really well done. And they gave us homework to take the if statements home. And we have that to share with our board for those that are interested. And maybe we can talk about that at a board workshop. That's all I had for that. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Blau or Mrs. Weems or Mrs. Fox?
No, I would add that the presentation was phenomenal. It was really good.
It was.
Yeah, and I think it's recorded and available for people to access, and that's one of the side benefits of this virtual experience that we were forced to adapt to.
I have a,
Sure, Mrs. Fox?
so for the community, you may have seen this workshop on mental health for middle school and high school students here in Farmington. So it's for middle school and high school students. There are 2 dates. One is March the 11th. The other is March 18th. And the description says this will be a space for students to learn the basics of mental health, learn how to fight stigma, become comfortable talking about emotions, learning how to talk about their feelings, and identify resources for them. These workshops will be led by a licensed counselor. So hopefully, if you have, as the community, please look at the listserv and consider registering for this very important program.
Thank you, Mrs. Fox.
Do you have a time? What times are they? What times are they?
6:30.
So for the high schools, the workshop is March the 11th. There is not a time.
The time is
And then-
6:30. I'm not, it may not be down that, but that is the Creating an Emotionally Healthy Environment series that Dr.
Yep.
Blau went to, the one for staff, and we have one for parents too, so they start at 6:30.
Okay, and then middle school is March 18th.
Thank you, Mrs. Fox. Are there any more reports from representatives? Okay. Moving on, we will move to recommendations for future agenda items. I'm seeing none. Oh, Ms. Lau.
I would like to consider as a future agenda item discussion around creating a community engagement committee.
Fantastic. I'm writing that down. Thank you, Dr. Blau. Any other recommendations? Seeing none, we'll move to good and welfare. Mr. Rich.
Thank you. I just want to take this time to once again thank our administration, our community, and everyone who has put in so much effort, so much energy into getting us to where we are at this point. I want to reiterate that we do have a long way to go, and we need to still be cognizant of safety parameters out there. There are more guidances being put out about once you're vaccinated, what you should and shouldn't do. It's not necessarily a get out of jail free pass. It's it means that you might not be as affected should you contract COVID, but you could still pass it along to someone else. I want everyone to, as always, thank you all for staying with us for this board meeting, and stay safe out there.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith?
I'd like to say to our staff, don't think that your voices and your cries have not been heard. They have. We also want to, I also want to say, not only are we concerned about our staff, but we're concerned about our students and their safety and their health as well. This has been hard, and these decisions were hard. It was hard for us to come to this conclusion, and we were pretty much held hostage. Did I do this for the money? Absolutely not. our students do need to go back to school. But I'd also like to say to our community, you guys have done a real hard hit on us. We're human and we have students and children too. And, you know, some of the comments were just really hard. And you got to understand that we were looking out and we are looking out for the best of all, for everyone. And the name calling wasn't going to bully us into changing and doing whatever it was you wanted. And, you know, we teach our students and our children not to bully or cyberbully. We need to take that into accountability and do it ourselves. We're in some really bad times. And we all need to stick together and work together through this. You know, my colleagues have all been very active and involved, especially our newer board members that just came into this and didn't know what they were getting into. I'm not able to get the vaccine as of yet, but I have gone into the schools and I've paid attention. But I want the staff to know that we do care. We do hear you. And if you need to reach out, we're here. It's going to be hard. I thank Dr. Goodrum for stepping into this role and just running and hitting the ground with this and helping us get through this. All districts are going through this. It's not just Farmington or Farmington Public Schools. Thank you to the parents that were emailing and saying, hey, well, this is happening in this district, it's happening in that district, could you look into this? We appreciate you too. And we know you're frustrated. So, you know, I just want to say thank you to my colleagues, thank you to Dr. Goodrum and her cabinet, and mostly to Diane Bauman and Kim Buckley. I don't know how we could get through this without their support and being so transparent and emailing and texting and all late times of the night. And, you know, just thank you to everyone and to our principals. We've got 2 schools that are at capacity of taking people in. I don't know what those 2 men are doing, but they're doing something that people want to go back to those schools. But thank you, and thank you for your support. Thank you for those of you that understood, and even those of you that didn't understand. Thank you, but you know, we got to get through this without the name calling and the bullying and, you know, emailing our new board members and just, let's get this and get this done right for the betterment of our kids. We've got to show our kids we're better than this. So thank you.
I would like to just take a moment to expand on what Mrs. Smith just said. We often recognize Dr. Goodrum for all of her hard work. I want to make sure that is known, that is extended to the cabinet, the administrative staff. You know, I think we started off with thanking everyone. There are a couple of extra thank yous, though, that are well deserving. There are a couple of folks in the audience who attend every single board meeting. They have spent 6, 7, 8 hours of their evening and night with us for every Tuesday since I don't know when. And I appreciate you guys as well. Dr. Coffin, Ms. Kaminsky, Diane Bauman, Sean McGuckin, thank you so much for, you know, helping us with the technology and especially through the technical difficulties. I don't know, you know, how we would do this without you. And then obviously Kim Buckley is phenomenal. I mean, I don't know how she's keeping up with all of this stuff, but you know, thank you for all that you do. We definitely see you. We recognize that you're here with us all the time, and I know she's a little bit shy, but I think she needs to know how much we talk in the background, behind the scenes, how much we appreciate you. A couple of things, I mentioned the vaccines. Really happy that Oakland Schools has developed this partnership. wanted to also thank Meyer. Representatives from Meyer dropped off 3 truckloads of swag bags, wipes, hand sanitizers, gloves, masks, and items to stock the teacher's lounge. On top of all of those wonderful donated items, Gill also received a check, or I'm sorry, gift cards in the amount of $1,500. Mr. Rich was there to receive those awards. Thank you to Meyer. I also wanted to acknowledge the Black History program that the district put on. Thank you to everyone who was involved with that. If you haven't watched it, it was absolutely phenomenal. What I'm most happy about was how well it was run. I was so happy to see and thrilled to see so many students engaged. Their performances were amazing. If you have not seen the dance performance, just watch that one by itself and you will just be in awe. I was really happy that the district reached out to children, both remote and in person, invited, all members of the choir, all members of some ensembles to come in and work together. It was really truly a phenomenal thing, and I'm just really, really surprised at how well that was done remotely or virtually. So there's a lot of good stuff going on. I know that it's, sort of easy to talk about the not so great things that are going on, but there's a bunch of great things going on, and we have a lot to celebrate. I want to thank my colleagues for their comments and their work tonight. I want to invite anyone else for good and welfare. Mrs. Heinrich?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Tiffany Vitor, kindergarten teacher at Forest Elementary. She sent out an invitation for March's Reading Month, and I read virtually to her kindergarten class, and I just want to recognize our staff. When my children went to Farmington schools, but when they were in kindergarten, I would go to parent night. I always wanted to be in that teacher's class because I just love kindergarten teachers. And even though this was a virtual event, I just loved being able to share with her, and I just felt like I wanted to go back to school and be in her class. And I just want to thank the teachers. And I have a love of reading, and I love children's books, and so it was just a wonderful experience. And I just want to recognize our teachers are really doing a great job.
Thank you. Seeing no further good and welfare, I think we are adjourned at 9:36. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.